Good morning, this is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. PsychicTarot.ca, book your tarot reading and unlock your spiritual journey. And the Pepper Master, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Oh my, I am fuzzy today. Let's take care of that. Don't know how that happened. All right. There we go. That's a little better. And it would seem that I'm also a little red. So let's see if we can fix that by giving myself a little more. No, that's better. That's worse. Okay, let's try that. That's better. There we go. Don't know exactly what happened to the light there. There we go. That's better. There we go. That's much better. All right. Good morning. And hello, kids and cubs, and welcome to season 5 and episode number 862 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. Oh, Canada. Always 100% Canadian. Today, recording day is March 12th, 2026, and it is a great day here at the Beaver Lodge. I am your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver. And not with me, as usual, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. Hope that things are okay back in Ottawa, my hometown, because with the ice storm yesterday during the day, I had some friends updating me, and it seemed like it was starting off pretty bad. So hopefully things are still okay, and that not too many lost power, and that there were not too many accidents. And I don't know, maybe Mr. Grizzly got a snow day or an ice day, because I read somewhere that school buses and stuff like that had been canceled yesterday, and I think schools might have been closed, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, I'm a little gravelly here this morning. Let me just get a little beaver moistener here. There we go. I am your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A. And as I mentioned, not with me is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. A big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Pepper Master, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and PsychicTarot.ca. Kids and Cubs, how's your mental health today? As I'm noticing, I've got something white in my hair here for some reason. I am, as you can tell, a little frazzled today. Having a bit of a weird day already, in that had a couple of tech issues, nothing major, like just really silly stuff. Like, for example, I have a cordless mouse where I guess the charge ran out. So now I have it on the cord, but because of the distance from the electrical outlet to the top of the desk and the length of the actual cord, showing you a little bit how the sausage is made here. I have it tied to an extension cord here, which doesn't actually reach the ground. So the weight of it keeps on trying to pull my mouse off the desk. Yeah, little tiny stuff, but nothing major. And just a bit of a weird morning in that, you know, those mornings where you wake up and you just can't seem to get started even though you're awake? Having one of those. It took me something like 20 minutes to decide whether I was going to eat something this morning, and then I had to decide on what. And news-wise, the delay actually starting today was more a result of me not really being able to find a theme of what I wanted to talk about today. There's so much news going on, right? We have the Iran stuff, and there's still the all the stuff about Pierre's travels and his trip to Europe that I, want to take a look at. But that involves again looking at a lot of video, and there's only so many hours in a day, so I haven't completed that part yet. So I can't run with it, although I could probably do a part one with what I've done so far. And then maybe a part two later, but I don't know if you guys want two parts of a lot of Pierre talking. So, you know, have to keep that in mind. And then there's all the stuff going on in Ontario with Doug Ford, announcing $2 billion for a new convention center while teachers are underfunded. And then he announced a $750 sort of, I guess, um, expense refund thing for supplies or whatnot if teachers are buying them, but teachers spend so much more than that and have been for a long time. And then there's a whole investigation with regard uh, to apparently about to from the financial. I think it was the Financial Accountability Office discovered that there's a certain number of $1 billion uh, in someone's budgetary envelope that seems to have no real reason to be there. Then there's a whole skills development fund that's still happening. And then there's the case of the seven OPP officers who were, um, again, so I don't even know the exact words to describe it if they're being probed or they're actually being investigated or something. Because, well, they were doing things that they weren't supposed to, allegedly. Then you've got all the mess in Alberta with what Danielle is doing, and the whole AHS stuff and the teacher stuff again on her end. Then the petition for the coal mining, her attack on immigrants. Um, th- there's just so much that I actually just it's like the news is like squirrel, and I actually don't know where to look, to be totally honest, because there's just so many things. So as I have a little I read an article and say, okay, that's important. I may need that later, and I set it aside. And there are so many different threads open that it's almost overwhelming. I guess that's the feeling. I'm feeling overwhelmed, to be totally honest. With everything that's going on. There's enough material out there for like 10 shows, and it's almost like I feel like I'm behind on keeping people informed because there's so much. And in the midst of all of that, there's just the regular business of Canada, right? The world keeps on turning and all the stuff that, there's good news announcements and there's things um, moving forward, and again, there's always like some really big topic out there that you're trying to cover. Well, that people are being breathless about that you're trying to cover, but it just takes your attention away from just the regular business of Canada. So there's yeah, I am feeling overwhelmed, and this is what I do. So I just can't imagine what it is like for folks at home. So there's no particular organization Today, we'll just be going from subject to subject. Um, I have no particular theme, no particular thread. I don't like that, to be totally honest. Um, I feel disorganized when that is the case, when I don't have like a through line of where I'm going. So the segues will probably be very inelegant today. Um, but yeah, exactly. Kit, Elaine, multi-tabbed Beaver again. I feel that I have so many different tabs open and uh, not enough hours in a day to go into the stories enough uh, to bring you some quality value added. Let's put it that way. And there's just so much. Uh, oh, thank you, Kit Bucky. I understand feeling overwhelmed, but themes stand out amongst all the developments, and you do a good job of addressing trends, not just individual incidents. Thank you. Yeah, some days I do like to let certain things accumulate over a certain day, a certain number of days, so I could come at it with an overall perspective rather than a hot take. But yeah, this is just even for me, and I love this, and I'm a political junkie. Like it's a lot. It is so much. There's even, again, a story that I saw, it must be about a week and a half ago now, about Doug Ford just simply deciding that they were not going to keep data or something like that about kids in the foster care system, particularly deaths of kids in the foster care system. And it's like, oh my God, I need to do something on that. And it just seems so far away now. um, but yeah, if you were feeling overwhelmed by the news, I will tell you objectively, it's not because you have a lack of capacity of any kind. The news is just all that overwhelming. So yeah, mentally, I'm a bit frazzled and feeling disorganized. And when I'm frazzled and feeling disorganized, particular when it comes to this, uh, feeling less confident and less assured, probably goes hand in hand. Uh, and almost um, pre-disappointed because I feel that it's not going to be up to my usual quality, which I really do not like to do. I do not like to do a show feeling either messy or unprepared, and I kind of feel like that today. Uh, just given again the various threads and me just not being able to pick one and run with it. And normally I'm pretty disciplined with that. When there's a whole bunch of noise, okay, then you got to do something. So pick something and run with it. And I just could not pick. So we will be going a little bit all over the place. Hopefully, your mental health is doing a little better than mine today. Let's start off with some of the obvious stuff. Uh, there has been some aftermath, of course, as a result of Lori Idlout. I'm not sure if it's Idlout or Idlet. I'd have to hear her actually um, pronounce her own name to know exactly. So I've been saying Idlet, but I've heard yes, a few people say Idlout yesterday. So my apologies if I have been mispronouncing things, because I like to make an effort to get names right. Um, but yes, speaking about Lori Idlet, there's a piece here from Evan Scrimshaw that I'd like to read into the record for you. Like I said, I'm just going to be going from things to things without seeming any thread. So hopefully you'll be able to follow. Um, what is the site for if not to say what others won't? I kid slightly. I was certainly not the only person warning the NDP that the decision to keep Jagmeet Singh as leader was leading the party to disaster. But Tuesday's news that Lori Idlout, the MP for Nunavut, has crossed the Liberals has me thinking about Singh. This site's archives are riddled with correct takes and also errors. My confidence O'Toole wouldn't win in 2021 despite straw polling is paired with an uncanny faith in Premier Stephen Del Duca. I certainly get my reputation and the fact that Mark Carney won The 2025 election for the Liberals doesn't really make me feel any better about the 2022 column saying Poilievre could never win. But the one thing I was unambiguously right about was Singh, who was obviously driving the NDP off a cliff for the entirety of his time as leader. Singh won less seats in English Canada in both 2019 and 2021 than Tom Mulcair's allegedly unacceptable 2015 performance, and his decision to enter supply and confidence with the Liberals was always going to kill the party. That's not revisionism. I wrote it the day he signed that God-forsaken document. Why am I thinking about all of this? Because as I think about Idlout crossing the floor, I keep coming back to one basic truth. Singh's catastrophic leadership and the decision to let him fight the 2025 election has led to this, a situation where the vagaries of resource development and defense spending policy don't just cause a tiny fracture in the party, but deal what could possibly be a death blow to the chances of getting party status back at the next election. And every other bit of analysis leads you crawling back to Singh's failure. Let's not underestimate the stakes of this. The NDP's path to 12 seats before this news was already extraordinarily narrow, given the fact that it would take winning back CPC NDP seats in rural and regional BC and smaller working class cities southwestern Ontario. Let me try that paragraph again because I think there might be a couple of typos there that threw me. Let's not underestimate the stakes of this. The NDP's path to 12 seats before this news was already extraordinarily narrow, given the fact that it would take winning back CPC NDP seats in rural and regional BC and smaller working class cities in southwestern Ontario, while also winning back Peter Julian and Matt Green's urban progressive ex-fiefdoms. If, or more accurately, when, the Liberals pick up Boulris's Montreal seat, the task was going to be nigh impossible because the leader who wins you back Windsor West and London Fanshawe isn't going to win back New Westminster or Hamilton Centre. Whatever you think of Avi Lewis, the task he is likely to be handed is immense. Now it's even harder. Singh's calamitous campaign and Boulris's departure means the NDP have 4 even remotely safe seats and 2 seats where they won by 300 votes or less. Idlout's floor crossing makes it even easier for the Liberals to flip it, but given the scale of Northern development under Carney and the fact that we managed to come so close in 2025 with a candidate not nominated until April, it's likely we would have won it with or without a floor crossing. Don Davies is equally in trouble next time because instead of liberal resources being spent to defend safe seats because we didn't understand the map, Vancouver Liberals will be correctly deployed in Kingsway in a way they weren't in 2025. Hal Gord-Johns will also get significantly more CPC attention next time with Abbey as leader, though their lackluster polling might save Johns. This is Singh's legacy. It confounded me at the time that nobody else could see the crisis the NDP were facing in their conservative-facing battleground, and I was proving entirely correct by the results. Of the 24 seats the NDP had on the new lines going into the 2025 election, the CPC won 10, the Liberals won 7, the NDP held 7. They got blasted out of Timmins and Skeena by the Tories, Victoria and Churchill by the Liberals, and even in the seats they held, they're by no means clear, all because of the arrogance to treat legitimate warning signs about Singh as a luxury that you didn't need to worry about. And one could say the same thing about Pierre at the moment. The NDP are going to be down 5 seats in short order when Boulris leaves. They won't win the seat again, which means they'll need to functionally run the table of their key targets to get back party status. Yes, a couple of CPC-held seats will be relatively easy gains on paper. Conservatives flocking to Carney in Manitoba and Alberta make Transcona and Graceback fairly easy flips right now. But they're staring down the barrel, not of one bad election and recovery, but a systemic repositioning as an irrelevance. The NDP doesn't have 2 more chances at it. They have 1. If this was an aberration and they're back with party status and a decent share of the vote, then they would be considered a big party again. But if the NDP don't have party status after the next election and the Liberals win a comfortable majority, questions that haven't even been considered will start to be asked. Will Cochrane and Vashi still include dippers on their panels? Will there be some form of head-to-head format on offer for debates moving forward? Will the already limited amount of coverage the NDP get from the print press be slashed further? The answers won't be pretty if they no longer are a major party. At that point, it'll be nearly impossible for the party to recover. The loss of coverage will only reinforce the party's position as an irrelevance, which will make it even harder to break through. As the Liberals consolidate their left flank with people like Idlout and soon-to-be MP and former Ontario NDP Deputy Leader Dolly Begum, you'll see a similar pattern with capable people choosing the only vehicle fit for purpose. Idlout might be today's crisis, but her departure is really just emblematic of the crisis the NDP's faced since they stupidly left Jagmeet fight the 2025 election. That decision set the NDP on a course to disaster, but they're not going to be able to solve Let me try that again. I'm having trouble today. That decision set the NDP on a course to disaster, one they're not going to be able to solve with Avi Lewis. But hey, at least they didn't have to agree with a Liberal and avoid this whole problem. And yeah, that um, sentiment struck me yesterday as well uh, when I heard of the things that the NDP is focused on at the moment. Right now, of course, voting is underway for the NDP Liberal leadership, the NDP leadership race. I should have just decided to try this later today, kids and cubs. I'm so sorry. I'm terrible this morning. Um, Maybe I need to unplug myself and plug myself back in. Maybe that will work. Here, let's try a little bit of Beaver moistener again. Maybe that'll reset the connections. All right. Uh, so yeah, that's what it had me thinking about. And when I was looking at what the NDP are, are saying at the moment, it kind of confirmed that for me. Uh, Yesterday, I think it was might be a post Heather McPherson that I saw. Um, there was a vote, I believe, yesterday was on a motion that the NDP had put forward, uh, which is let me put it this way: it's noble. It's not that in principle it's a bad thing, but um, is it the thing that people are concerned about right now, that are top of mind right now, that people are um, uh, something that will move votes? Um, on this show, one of the things that we keep on saying, right, is that nations don't have friends, they have interests. And the other one is that never look to politics for morality because you're guaranteed to be disappointed because nations have interests and they don't have morals. We talk and we wax poetic a lot about what we stand for and what our values are, but we see it when we vote, right? Issues that are more urgent and immediate to us are the issues that move our vote. And the NDP doesn't seem to be anywhere on those issues. So here's an example. Um, Jenny Kwan, solid constituency MP, um, and someone who's doing the work that conservatives will not do. We pointed this out, right? Conservatives keep on introducing motions. Motions are much easier to write than actual bills. They require less work. Bills, when they pass, right, are binding. Motions are not. So when the conservatives use more motions, they're not actually trying to move policy. It's marketing, right? Here's a motion. We get a clip of us reading the motion. We get a clip of us debating on the motion. We put that on the internet. You know, we fundraise off that, and then there's something in the motion that's either a poison pill or it's a motion that we know that other parties won't support. And then when they vote against it, well, then we don't talk about how the NDP or Bloc or the Green member voted. We just say, oh, those liberals voted against our bill to whatever, keep children safe or fix bail or stop this or stop that, whatever. And of course, when you actually read the motion, well, that's not exactly true. And when you read the motion, um, you know, they are some like these statements, but there's no plan, right? There's no real policy. There's no real plan. There's not like there's timelines and budgets and anything associated with it. It's just, you know, some of these general statements. The NDP is doing the serious work because they actually, Jenny Kwan actually proposed a bill. So they met with stakeholders, right? They did research. They put the work into writing an actual bill. However, I'll read the story to you from Rafi Boudjikanian. When the NDP arms control bill that seeks to end largely permit-free Canadian military exports to the U.S. is put to a vote on Wednesday, that's yesterday, it could garner the support of more than a dozen Liberal MPs. That would be the first time some in the Liberal caucus split from the government's position on legislation under Prime Minister Mark Carney. Quote, by my count so far, I think there may be somewhere between 9 to 16 Liberal members who may support the bill, said the NDP's Jenny Kwan, the bill's main sponsor, at a news conference on Tuesday. Two Liberal MPs who spoke to CBC News on condition they not be named, citing the confidentiality of caucus discussions, confirmed that range is accurate. Up to now, 4 Liberals have publicly supported Bill C-233, which the NDP calls the No More Loopholes Act. The legislation would impose export controls on arms and munitions that are sent to the U.S. similarly to the mechanisms that exist for most other countries. The NDP says that Canadian weaponry sent south of the border ends up diverted to other countries even if the Canadian government does not directly export them, naming Sudan and Israel as examples. Speaking during a parliamentary debate on Monday, Liberal MP Zalma Zahid said the bill, quote, is about ensuring that Canada lives up to its international obligations and that our industries act responsibly within the global defense trade. The bill is not anti-industry, it's not anti-Canada's defense sector, but it is anti-complicity in violence against civilians. Other Liberals who have publicly affirmed their support are Nathaniel Erskine-Smith, Faris Al-Soud, and Aslam Rana. Last month, CBC News reported Canada's Crown Corporation, which oversees international arms sales, had flagged then International Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc about US-bound artillery propellants, which were then destined in part for Israel in March 2025. That was more than a year after the Canadian government has declared it was no longer issuing permits for exports to Israel, citing concerns over the conflict in Gaza. Activist groups have also published a report alleging hundreds of shipments have made their way from the U.S. to Israel. CBC News has independently tracked a couple of those shipments, which originated from Canada. Kwan said she's still open to amendments on the private builders bill, but has not received any concrete suggestions from Liberal MPs beyond she remove language around the U.S. The government has said the existing exemption to the U.S. is no loophole, but part of a deliberate calculation to allow for better defense integration with a key ally. At Monday's debate, Karim Bardisi, the Parliamentary Secretary to Industry Minister Melanie Joly, said the bill would, quote, limit Canadian sovereignty at a time of great conflict, while playing no meaningful difference on the conflicts that are of such justifiable concern to those who support the bill. He added the bill would not be closing a loophole, quote, but, quote, blowing a critical defense and trade relationship with a NATO ally. Speaking for the Conservative Party, MP Ziad Abul Taif said the bill is an attempt to impose Canadian foreign policy on our closest ally, those working for our defense industry paying the price, which made me laugh in Canadian because I remember the Conservatives trying to impose Canadian policy on climate on Ukraine when Ukraine was trying to get an expanded free trade agreement. But now they have a problem with it. Okay. He said the bill would create problems in the Canada-US relationship and put Canadian jobs in jeopardy. And, well, if you know the Conservatives, we cannot definitely do anything that could create problems with the Canada-US relationship, because we have enough problems already. But, of course, if you listen to the Conservative, all those problems are Canada's fault. The Bloc Québécois expressed reservations as well. Bloc MP Alexis Brunel-Duceppe said the bill is well-intentioned but too broad, arguing it would end up hurting industries already suffering due to American tariffs. He also said the U.S. may simply choose not to play ball. Quote, the idea that the United States would start asking for Canada's approval to ship small arms and light weapons is wishful thinking, he said. Asked by CBC News about whether the government intends to let members freely vote on Wednesday, House Leader Stephen McKinnon offered no comment. And of course, the vote was held, and of course, this did not pass. According to Rafi Boudjikanian, an NDP private members bill that would have ended exemptions from Canada's export control regime for weapons and ammunition destined for the U.S. failed to pass at the House of Commons on Wednesday, though it garnered the support of 15 Liberal MPs who sided against their government. Quote, one of the nice things in a democracy, especially in our government, we are able to vote our own conscience, so that's what led me to believe that was the right thing to do, said Liberal MP Gurbuxh Saini, who represents the British Columbia riding of Fleetwood Port Kells. Other Liberals who support the bill include Lori Idlout, who freshly crossed the floor from the NDP, and former Cabinet Minister Stephen Guilbeault. Patrick Weiler, Samir Zuberi, Faris Al Soud, Sean Casey, Zalma Saeed, Chi Nguyen, Greg Fergus, Ikra Khalid, Nathaniel Erskine Smith, Aslam Rana, Christina Tesser Dirksen, and Michael Coteau rounded out the list of Liberals who voted with the NDP. Green Party leader Elizabeth May also voted for the bill, and the Conservatives and Bloc Québécois voted against it. 23 MPs did not vote, including 15 Liberals. Prior to the vote, Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand said the government opposed the bill. Quote, Canada has one of the strongest export control regimes in the world, she said, with human rights considerations applied to every single permit issued for military goods. The changes proposed in this bill would decimate Canada's defense industry, would weaken Canada's role in NATO, and would jeopardize the capabilities of Canadian armed forces. The bill's sponsors, NDP MP Jenny Kwan, challenged the government by pointing out how two former Liberal cabinet ministers, Alan Rock and Lloyd Axworthy, had recently come out in favor of her legislation. Quote, they said Parliament now faces a clear choice: maintain an outdated exemption that undermines Canada's credibility or adopt a modern principle statement that reflects our commitments and responsibilities, Kwan said. Will the Prime Minister be honest with reality and vote yes to Bill C-233? The vote marked the first time some Liberal MPs voted against the government's stated position under Prime Minister Mark Carney. Canadian arms and ammunition can largely be shipped to the U.S. permit-free, the NDP calling this, quote, a loophole allowing weaponry manufactured here to be diverted to foreign conflict zones such as Sudan or Israel. And the government says the exemption is a key component of Canada's defense partnership with its largest trading partner. Currently, manufacturers are directed by the Crown Corporation that oversees international arms transfers to fill out due diligence questionnaires prior to shipments, which include questions of end buyers and users, representatives who can verify said use, and concerns about human rights violations. In March 2025, that Crown Corporation flagged then International Trade Minister Dominique LeBlanc about U.S.-bound artillery propellants, which were in part destined for Israel, as revealed by CBC News last month. That was more than a year after Canada had declared it was no longer issuing permits for exports to Israel, citing concerns over Gaza. Concerns over hundreds of U.S.-bound shipments ending up in Israel were also detailed by activist groups in a report last fall, with CBC News independently verifying a couple of those shipments. So here's the thing. In principle, this is a good bill. Morally, it's a good bill. We don't stand for genocide. We don't stand for illegal wars. Therefore, it makes sense that we should not stand for our arms and any weapons that are Canadian made and built being used for those purposes. All of this makes sense. Absolutely. And again, you had 15 Liberal MPs and one Green MP that were willing to vote with that. So clearly, enough people thought that the bill was well written enough and not too broad in order to support that. The thing is that does a bill like this, even though it is important, does a bill like this capture the attention of the Canadian public? Is a bill like this subject matter that's going to make people at home think, oh, well, gee, the Liberals didn't support this bill. I am changing my vote to the NDP. Now, there are people that are very idealistic, and maybe for them it would. Those people maybe already do vote NDP. But is it a vote getter? Is it a vote mover? And the answer to that, sadly, is no. The bill got 22 votes for it, 295 votes against. It failed pretty massively. And a lot of work went into that bill. And they got a couple of days press for it. But is that the top of mind issue? Is that the issue that if the NDP strategically is going to run on, that will get them the votes that they need to get to at least 12 seats? And probably not. The NDP has been the party out of all of them that has had the most morally, if one could say that, clear position on what's going on in Palestine, in Gaza, and how it should be opposed. Again, do Canadians at home wondering about supply shocks, wondering about the rising cost of oil, wondering about uh, whether or not the guy south of us, who's a little trigger happy, might turn his attention to us and do bad things to us, is that the subject that is going to move them? In Oshawa and Windsor, those areas that were once NDP strongholds, where the auto manufacturing sector is at play, is this the type of are these the type of concerns that are going to bring them back to the NDP? Even Don Davies' position with regard to what he alleges the prime minister said about the war in Iran. You know, your first statement didn't mention anything about this being a war that did not respect international law. Yeah, that's true. But for how many people is it really going to matter that on that first day, in the first hours, the prime minister didn't stand up and wag his finger and said, "You're violating international law," like that would matter with the belligerents in this case around Israel and the United States, who have long reputations for respecting international law. You can be the moral party, and there's a place for that, and there's a need for that. But in today's particular context, and in the context of the party, where they're going to be at 5 seats relatively soon, and need to be able to grab onto something that will make them relevant, are these issues it? Is sending the message to the Canadian people that you seem to care more about what's going on in Gaza and us being morally respectable as a country going to be what moves the votes of people who are wondering if they are going to lose their job? I'm not sure that the NDP is on the right track here, and maybe they can't get on that right track until they choose an actual leader. But if the NDP is not going to do the class thing, workers' rights, better pay, better public services, if they're not going to do the class thing, they're not going to go on that terrain. I'm not sure their path to being relevant is going to lie in constantly chastising the government for not being moral enough. Even if we agree with the positions that these types of arms and weapons should not be sold, or there should not be such a type of loophole not be sold to the United States if the United States is just going to redistribute them to others. Yes, but if we don't do that, and then there are no sales or jobs related to that, right? And people lose jobs. And again, you could take the more position and say, well, those are not jobs we need. We can make better jobs. But there are people that hold those jobs that if we eliminate them, the kitchen table issues come to the fore again. So I'm wondering about the NDP's ability to read the room. That they still seem to be so much focused on what Canada is doing internationally and how we can be better, rather than what Canada's doing at home for Canadians. And I'm not sure that a party that has more of a focus on what it is that we're doing internationally than rather than what we're doing at home is going to be a party that's on the path to getting itself back to relevance. And as Evan Scrimshaw states, if there's a couple of elections like this, you know, ironically, a lot of the stuff that the NDP was doing to the Greens to keep them out of the debates might be stuff that other parties start doing to the NDP to keep them out of debates in upcoming elections. Ugh. And these are things I hate to say. Because, yes, I agree with the NDP that, right? Uh, how would I put it? It would be nice. It could maybe even be helpful in certain instances if we did walk our talk as a country 100% of the way. But we don't because we have interests. We don't always live up to our ideals because there's a practical consideration that comes along and allows us to fudge it. And then I guess this comes back to the NDP asking, does it want to be a viable political party that could one day have a chance of forming government? Or does it want to be the conscience of the nation? And at a moment in which a nation is having an existential crisis and is focused on how do we survive and get through the urgency and immediacy of this moment, the public square, there may be a whole lot less room in the public square for debates or matters of morality or for a party that wants to be the conscience. Right? We talk about, if we bring this down on a lower level, when we talk about crimes of despair, right? Uh, there's probably a lot of people that are smashing car windows to get the spare change that they see, or because they see something valuable they might be able to hawk so that they can eat or feed an addiction, who probably wouldn't be smashing into car windows if they did not need to eat or feed an addiction. But they do. So there goes morality because I got to eat or feed my addiction. They're not bad people. They're not immoral. They're just in a bad situation. And they're doing whatever they can in their own power to get by, to live to fight another day. I don't think the NDP, where it is right now, is focusing on the subjects, on the things that would allow them to occupy enough space in the public consciousness and the public mind for them to be thought of as a viable alternative. And the candidates that are there running for the leadership, um, it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon, right? You had Avi Lewis talking at some point, about our desire to increase our defense spending and increase our exploitation of oil and gas, and saying that, that's probably not where our future should be. And in a perfect world, if we had all the choices, maybe that is the case. But it's not. And that's where the money is. And we're going where the money is. So yeah, I do wonder. I do wonder what the future of the NDP will be in this case if they keep on insisting on wanting to be the moral party here. There was a small moment yesterday where the Prime Minister and Lori Idlout had an opportunity to speak. I guess this was probably just before they were going to go into caucus so that she could be introduced to caucus Liberal Party. I think the sound quality might not be the best on this, but we will bring it to you so that you can see it, unless in case you missed it at the time.
It is a great pleasure. One of Canada's greatest constituency MPs. You represent a riding that is the size of Mexico. And very down to earth, and we've had conversations about what we can do, both large and small, in Nunavut. Large projects, but also helping everyone get ahead. So all for Canada, Canada for all. C'est un grand plaisir. Je suis très honoré.
Sure, and I'm very honored to have an MP like a Lori, and as of now, who will be working with us, an extraordinary MP. She represents a riding that is as large as Mexico, and she's done so with determination, and we will work together with Nunavut and Canada.
Democratic process. Is this disrespectful to the democratic process?
Could you respect the democratic process and allow the deputy to speak?
Lori, what did the government say to get you to cross the floor? What did they tangibly promise you? More consultation, specific asks? Like what incentivized you?
Like with any complicated issue, it wasn't just one thing that happened. There are a variety of many things that have allowed me to really reflect on this, and I'm very thankful to be so warmly welcomed.
What specifically?
So there you have it. Not much to say, to be totally honest, in this case. But there. Not much you can garner from that, right? Surely there will be more as the days and weeks go by. But yeah, not not too much going on here. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Lori Idlout will to stand in the House yesterday and say a few words. Also, Matt Genereux stood up in House to ask his first question as well, which had something to do with men's mental health, which always makes us happy to hear someone bringing some attention to that. Matt Genereux specifying that I think it is that 75% of instances of taking one's own life, and 75% of instances, I believe, of death via drug overdose are happening in the male population, and therefore it might be important to draw some more attention to men's mental health. And with that, we agree specifically. So making asking a good question. And then when Lori Idlout rose for the first time to a standing ovation, it seems that there was a certain amount of heckling and all of that kind of stuff. But we will bring this to you. This was her first question in the House as a new Democrat, and this is the wrong thing. So let's try this one. There we go. This is the correct thing. Let's bring this to you here.
Honourable member for Nunavut.
I am proud to join a team that will take the larger picture of meeting the current political environment and is set on meeting the immediate needs of the North. Northerners know that food security is about more getting foods on the shelves. It is about addressing the cost of living, local capacity, and true food sovereignty. Can my colleague, the Minister of Northern and Arctic Affairs, tell this House how our government is moving toward beyond food subsidies and creating a food economy for those that call the North home?
Member.
So that was her first question in the House as a Liberal member. A question asked, of course, to the own government to give them an opportunity, of course, to tell the House what it is that they are doing on those subjects. So yeah. That's where things stand. The NDP, to their credit, are not embarrassing or humiliating themselves the way that Conservatives do when such things happen for crossings. They are not calling her names and a traitor and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, they are bringing attention, of course, again, to what they claim is a moral issue that the will of the voters was not respected because she left. But of course, this once again is a bad faith interpretation of our civics. It's otherwise informing Canadians about how things work, rather than the way that they do. And it is very clear, again, we have to remember that we don't elect governments, we elect a parliament. And a parliament is comprised of members of parliament. Each one of them has individual agency as a member of parliament to represent their constituents in the manner that they see fit. The seat does not belong to the party. No MP is forced to remain the member of a party by virtue of their election. If an MP feels that their current party is not serving the needs of their constituents, an MP is free to use their conscience, their power as an MP, to move to another party or sit as an independent, or give up their seat. Say, I don't want to do this anymore. Right? It's not, in Canada, if an MP decides they no longer want to be an MP, it's not that they leave Parliament and that the party fills the seat with someone else. There is an election. The seat belongs to the MP, not the party. And the parties that keep on doing this keep on wanting to make Canadians believe that the MP first serves the party rather than the constituents. And that's just not how it works. That's why I keep on saying is that if in an election you choose to vote for the party, and it doesn't really matter who your representative is because you're voting for the party, you have the right to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing obligates you to vote for the person over the party, if that is your choice. But the way our system works, and the way that everything is counted, is that you vote for the person. And we need to be clear on that. We had Dimitri Soudas make a comment the other day, yesterday, about all of this. He was saying, if we want a solution to this, then we should pass a law banning floor crossing. That would just be the solution. We also have as well, basically asking them if the roles were reversed, what would they do? And we all know that there is no galaxy dimension postal code area code solar system in which the Conservatives would refuse floor crossers coming to them. We know that because they haven't when it's happened. Dimitri Soudas, may I ask a sincere question? If in the last election you earned 169 seats and members of parliament from other parties expressed a genuine desire to join the government caucus and sit as Conservative MPs, would you truly turn them away? Would you refuse the opportunity to strengthen your mandate and broaden your coalition simply because they were not originally elected under your banner? And this was a question asked in response to Pierre PoiliOVER making a statement saying, Mark Carney is using backroom deals once again to seize a costly majority that voters rejected, which will enable Liberals to balloon debt, inflate the cost of living, block resources, and turn criminal looses on our street. Conservatives will do what we promised voters, fight for Canada that is affordable, safe and strong at home, and unbreakable abroad. That's his new slogan, by the way. Stronger at home, so we're unbreakable abroad. First of all, Pierre's go-to line of making backroom deals is getting as tired as his leadership. Especially when, again, he's only in the position that he is in at the moment as a result of a backroom deal of his own. Again, this does not make any sense. In addition, with regard to floor crossing, it talks about sour grapes here. And he says, if we genuinely want to end the sour grapes debate over floor crossers, the solution is neither outrage nor moral posturing. It is legislation. Any member of parliament has the authority to introduce a bill. A clear and principled bill could simply state that any MP who chooses to leave the political party under whose banner they were elected in order to join another recognized party must immediately resign their seat and seek a renewed mandate through a by-election. That is not punishment, it is accountability. Voters cast their ballots based on a combination of candidate, party platform, and leadership. When an MP materially alters that equation after the election, the democratic contract changes. No, it doesn't. The cleanest remedy is to return the decision to the electorate. No, it isn't. It isn't. The democratic contract is that you vote for an MP and that you trust that MP for the term to represent your best interests. And if after that term you feel that MP has not represented your best interests, even if that means switching parties along the way or leaving the party to sit as an independent, then you get to express your verdict. And the contract is that you elect the MP and the MP represents you, not their party. The MP is your voice to their party, not their party's voice to you. So if an MP feels that the party is not doing right by the constituents, or that the constituents could be best served under another banner, that is not changing the democratic contract. That is completely acting within the bounds of the democratic contract. What is stated here is a misrepresentation of the democratic contract. Floor crossings do not need a remedy. They are there to preserve the independence of the MP to represent the constituents. It gives the MP the leverage over their party when the party wants to impose something on constituents that they have rejected. Such legislation would not target one party or another. It would apply equally to all 343 members of Parliament, and that is precisely the point. It would compel every MP to stand up and be counted publicly and transparently on where they believe democratic legitimacy truly lies. If members believe a personal mandate is sufficient, they can vote against it. If they believe party affiliation forms part of the mandate granted by voters, they can support it. No more selective indignation, no more partisan outrage depending on who benefits, just a straightforward rule grounded in democratic clarity. If we trust voters, we should not fear asking them again. Okay, but if we trust voters, then we should also not get into the sour grapes, endless debate about how much it's going to cost. When a political party decides to go to an election early. Because if we trust voters, we should not fear asking them again, right? That should apply for if the Liberals decide to call an election early because they could secure maybe 220 seats rather than 172 and they decide to go it. Then, oh my God, I can't believe the Liberals are self-serving. No, we don't need this. It's another needless election that's going to cost us millions of dollars. If you're going to do it every time somebody crosses the floor, because if we trust voters, we should not fear asking them again, then when a party wants to go early, if we trust voters, we should not fear asking them again. And the cost should not be part of the equation financially. If this is true only for floor crossings, but not for political parties when they want to go early, then it's just another form of hypocrisy. If it is about truly trusting voters and not fearing asking them again, then one should have the attitude that there's never a bad time for an election. There's never a bad time to ask voters what they think. You can never ask them too much or too often. So we could do all of that he suggests, try to change what the democratic contract is, or if we want to end the endless sour grape debate over floor crossers, we can just accept that floor crossing always has been and currently is a part of the system that was expressly provided for because it serves a specific purpose. We can stop and ask why it is we built this fence before we propose taking it down, and get clear on what are our civics. And accept that the only people that seem to, again, as Stephen Harper, I think, pointed out, the only people that seem to care about floor crossing are the people that are the parties that nobody's crossing to. And it's not like the Conservatives have not had a chance to do this before. It's not like the Conservatives have not had a chance to do this before. I think it was, when was it? Back in, well, the first time I know of is in 2006. And I learned this from reading Mark Bory's book about Pierre Ripper. And in that book, one of Harper's first, or Harper's Bill number 1, I believe, is the Accountability Act. We made a big deal about that after the sponsorship scandal, right? And during the debates on the Accountability Act in committee, when they were making amendments to the bill before it goes back to the House for third reading, at that time, it would appear that the Liberals, the Bloc, and the NDP were all for banning floor crossing because in 2000, I believe it was, the Harper Conservatives had poached David Emerson from the Liberals. David Emerson was a minister in Paula Martin's government, and then the election happened and David Emerson won his seat. And then before he had served even 1 second in the House of Commons as a Liberal in his new mandate, the Conservatives grabbed him and made him the minister. He kept his same ministerial title, but in their own government, so that he could finish what it is that he was working on. At that point, the Conservatives had just benefited from a floor crossing. And everybody else was against that and said, hey, let's just put that in this bill. Let's ban it. Let's change the democratic contract. And in committee, Pierre PoiliOVER blocked that. And it never made it into the bill. And then came another moment. Keep on looking for the date on this. I believe it was, let me see here. I've got the Our Commons vote record on it. Wednesday, February 8th, 2012. Vote number 123, 41st Parliament, first session. Sitting number 76. Motion text. Second reading of Bill C-306, an act to amend the Parliament Act of Canada. And this was a vote that would have put it into law that floor crossings would be banned. And it was moved that the bill be read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Procedure on House Affairs. 91 votes for it, 181 votes against it. And if you look here, and I will open this up for you and hopefully be able to show it to you. Nope, that's not the one. I don't know why it keeps on going to the old one first rather than asking me what I want to show you first. There we go. This new system is not as clear as it was before. So here we go. So this is the, nope. Wrong page. There we go. So we have here, okay, an act to amend the Parliament of Canada Act. Just made it see, yeah, it's big enough for you guys to see. And that's what this vote was about here. And if we go here to the Conservatives, 3 voted yes, 142 voted against it. If we click down here, and go all the way down to Pierre PoiliOVER, he voted nay. So twice, Kits and Cubs, when he was part of the government and had the opportunity to include a ban on floor crossing into legislation, Pierre PoiliOVER voted against it. Because at that time, his party was benefiting from floor crossings. So we already know the answer to Dimitri Soudas's question. That Pierre was leading a government that had 169 seats and only was lacking 3, and 3 MPs were willing to cross. We said, no, sorry, that's not how we do things here. Would he say no? We know he wouldn't say no. He's already said no twice. It's on the record to banning floor crossings. He loves them because sometime they go his party's way. So every time we get a floor crossing and every time we get this political performance art, oh my God, I can't believe the people, the mandate, oh, they're being so disenfranchised. It is political performance art. An instant stock photo, interpretive dance, tired old lines. Oh, there's a floor crossing. What do we say in this? Oh, here's what we say at this occasion. But they don't mean it. They get us worked up. They claim that undemocratic things are happening. Shady backroom deals. It's all dirty and unseemly. Or we could just admit that is the way things work and they were always intended to work and that there's a reason for it. MPs represent constituents, not the party. Parties are private organizations. A party banner is a convenient way of organizing people of somewhat like mind. The party is an easy way to organize people to share resources, to mount a campaign, rather than 343 people running as independents of various types. Parties can serve a purpose. But parties are private organizations. They are not necessary to the democratic process. An MP is necessary to the democratic process, an elected representative. A party is not. I think it was Greg McEachern asked a pretty interesting question, or brought up an interesting point. Back in the day, when the Progressive Conservative Party was imploding and reform was coming to be, there was a block of MPs. I think there was 13 of them or something at the time that left the party and sat together as an independent caucus. Did any of them resign their seats first and asked their voters for their permission? Greg McEachern here. When you hear a former Conservative MP, who was also a former Progressive Conservative MP, call floor crossings undemocratic, it makes you wonder why former PC and Canadian Alliance MPs didn't resign en masse in 2003 to run in by-elections instead of just registering their new party. There was enough of them that they could form their own party and have party status. But all they did was just move away from the party and registered as a new party. The Conservatives don't believe in this. It is performance art. So yeah, we could do as Dimitri Soudas suggests, enter into this whole legislative process to ban it, or, as I mentioned, we can just ask why it is we built that fence in the first place. Why is it that floor crossings are part of our system? And then respect that and act accordingly. They're wasting our time. And if you are opening up your wallet and you are donating on the subject, they went fishing and caught themselves a sucker. Don't be fooled by this, by the sour grapes or the sanctimony. It's a thing. There's a reason for it. And it would just be easier if we got familiar with our civics and accepted that reason, rather than working ourselves up into a lather. One final comment here from Don Davies. Here, again, doing the sanctimonious thing that I particularly don't have much time for in such situations. Nope. Once again, it just will not let me switch gracefully. So here it is. Okay, and clearly that did not work. So let's try that one more time. Having a day today. All right, there we go.
Good morning, everyone. The position of the New Democratic Party on floor crossing is long-standing and clear. To us, the decision of voters at the ballot box is sacred trust. And if a member of Parliament wants to override that decision, we believe they must go back to the voters and make that case to them and receive a renewed mandate. Any questions?
Was there anything that happened within the NDP caucus that would have pushed Lori out as opposed to drawing her to the Liberals?
Look, in these times, Canada needs New Democrats more than ever. People are losing their jobs. People can't access health care. They can't afford rent or to buy a house. They can't put food on the table. Working people are being left behind. And New Democrats will never stop fighting for working people and improving the lives of them across Canada.
All right. So the answer.
Good morning, everyone.
Whoops. There you go. So that's not an answer to the question, which lets one suppose that the answer to that question is yes, there was something that did happen in caucus that might have pushed her out. Again, I'll reiterate what he said here. The position of the New Democratic Party on floor crossing is long-standing and clear. To us, the decision of voters at the ballot box is a sacred trust. And if a member of Parliament wants to override that decision, we believe they must go back to the voters. The premise behind that statement from Don Davies, however, is that when voters went to the ballot box, they voted for the NDP. That they did not vote Idlout. they voted for the NDP. Again, that's not how our system is organized. The interim leader of the NDP seems to severely misunderstand or is intentionally otherwise informing Canadians of what reality is. And then, in his non-answer to a rather direct question about whether there was anything internal to the party that would have pushed Ms. Idlout out, rather, he says that the NDP is fighting for working people who are left behind, and that New Democrats will never stop fighting for working people and improving the lives of them across Canada, which brings us back to the subject with which we started, is trying to close a loophole on arm exports, fighting for working Canadians, and making sure that they have food to eat and all that type of stuff. Is it providing better healthcare? Is it providing better education? Is wagging the finger because we're not doing Gaza in the way that NDP would do Gaza if they were the government. Issues that will help get your child educated, get you a doctor, ensure that you keep your job, or that you have supports should you lose it. Is chastising the federal government for not mentioning in their declaration that what the United States and Israel has just done in Iran is in violation of international law, and claiming that the Prime Minister is inconsistent and incoherent in his position, particularly when we have the guy south of us who has really given us an example of not knowing what you stand for, what being incoherent and inconsistent really looks like. Does that help educate someone, get them a doctor, find them a job, or offer them support should they lose their job? It just seems that someone at the NDP is not sitting in a room and picking issues. They'll pick issues with which we might morally very much agree with and say, you know, it's very important. Yes, we should be doing that. But at the same time, you have people think, well, if the trade-off for doing that is that I lose my job in these uncertain times, maybe that moral issue is not going to be my top of mind issue when I go to the ballot box. The NDP and the Conservatives seem to be in a really interesting position and very similar positions in the sense that either they do not know what they stand for, or what they stand for is not marketable to the Canadian public at this moment. There's probably, just as there is no appetite for a party that seemingly wants to put what's happening in Gaza before what's happening in Canada, there is no appetite for a party at the moment that keeps on living in a reality in which all we have to do is just be nice enough to the United States and maybe we can get a deal with them. These two things are not our current reality at the moment. I don't know. I don't know if any of you are having that same impression. But yes, if you do, please let us know here in the chat. Get Saucy going. I thought the NDP was fighting for Gaza and Iran. Yeah. That's the impression I get too when I watch them go. Like I said, if any of you have thoughts on this, please. By the way, Well, I'm becoming a fuzzy beaver again. Yeah, that sometimes I've noticed happens when I come in and out of a share screen for some reason. I temporarily get fuzzy. Oh well. Um, Other things we wanted to chat about today. I didn't think I would have so much to say about that first part, to be totally honest. So it turns out that maybe I did indeed have more of a theme than I thought I did today. Or it's just that I'm speaking a little more slowly since I've been tripping over my tongue earlier on. Um, Touch of news on Iran. The Prime Minister, one of the other things the NDP did was chastise the Prime Minister because he was not in the House for the Take Note debate that everybody had asked on Iran. Take Note debates are another one of those things that I find interesting in our democracy because they are important in the sense that they allow people from various parties to go on the record and say what they believe about certain things. I'm not sure what utility they have other than that, than to create a moment where MPs can all go out and share their positions or share their views on things. Um, but often when we have emergency crises, you'll have a party like the NDP or whatnot that says, we need to have a take note debate because we need to know where people stand on this. And then they all go out and they state their positions. And then not much really comes of that. However, they wanted one, and Mark Carney scheduled one. And Mark Carney was not in the House for it because apparently he was at some Ramadan celebrations with the community. And then the NDP, principally, was a party that wanted to point that out and make a case out of it, saying, well, the Prime Minister should have been there for this because this was very, very important. So the next day, the Prime Minister was indeed in the House of Commons to be able to answer a little more onto what his position is with regard to that. Of course, question period is not the best time for this because the answers are short and usually, well, it's question period, but not answer period. But according to the Canadian press, Prime Minister Mark Carney told MPs in the House of Commons Tuesday that Canada is not involved in the US-Israeli war on Iran and, quote, will never participate in it. The Prime Minister changed his schedule to attend Tuesday's question period after being criticized for not answering to parliamentarians about Canada's position on the war in Iran. Carney was asked a few questions about the conflict Tuesday. Conservatives chose to grill the Prime Minister on public safety, inflation, and affordability. So the Conservatives weren't too bothered by the fact that he wasn't there, but of course the Conservatives support what is happening, it would seem. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet did raise the war in Iran and criticized Carney for traveling the globe like Marco Polo. Again, not sure why certain parties are deciding to sound like Pierre PoiliOVER. Don Davies did one of his Pierre PoiliOVER imitations as well with regard to floor crossings and whatnot. And now Bloc Québécois stealing the, oh my God, he's traveling all around the world. And it's like, these strategies are not working for Pierre. You probably should not adopt them. Blanchet called on Carney to share with parliamentarians his vision for the Middle East. Quote, Canada's stance is clear. Canada supports the necessity to prevent Iran's nuclear program and the export of terrorism, Carney said in French. Canada is not participating in the United States in Israeli offensive and will never participate in it. Blanchet later asked Carney whether he's met with European leaders and whether they had come to common position on Iran. Carney listed off the G7 leaders he's spoken with, including U.S. President Donald Trump, and said they will find a common stance on de-escalation in Iran. Quote, it will take a lot of drifting of the continents to make the United States part of Europe, Blanchet quipped back. Carney said he spoke to French President Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday. A readout from the Prime Minister's office said the two leaders, quote, underscored opening secure access through the Strait of Hormuz and discussed rising energy prices from the conflict. In fact, since we're talking about it here, I can indeed give you the full readout here. It says, today, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, spoke with the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. Prime Minister Carney and President Macron discussed the escalating situation in the Middle East. They condemned Iran's strikes against civilians and civilian infrastructure and underscored the need to prevent further regional escalation. The leaders underscored opening secure access through the Strait of Hormuz. Prime Minister Carney emphasized Canada's support for efforts to safeguard international shipping and ensure freedom of navigation. Prime Minister Carney and President Macron discussed the global economic implications of the crisis, including the impact on rising energy prices. The Prime Minister welcomed the President convening G7 leaders tomorrow to discuss coordination and thanked him for his leadership as G7 President. They agreed to increase coordination among G7 partners and to remain in close contact as the situation evolves. And then about that G7 leaders meeting, there's a readout from that. It says today the Prime Minister, and that was yesterday, March 11th, participated in a virtual G7 leaders meeting on the situation in the Middle East. The meeting was convened by the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, and attended by the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Japan, Takeshi Sanae, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Sir Keir Starmer, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. The leaders discussed the escalating situation in the Middle East and condemned Iran's strikes against civilians and civilian infrastructure, underscoring the need to prevent further regional escalation. They underscored the importance of supporting partners in the region, including the Gulf states. The leaders discussed the global economic implications of the crisis, including the impact on rising energy prices. They reiterated their support for today's International Energy Agency collective action decision to make 400 million barrels of oil from their emergency reserves available to address disruptions in oil markets stemming from this conflict. They underscored the importance of opening secure access through the Strait of Hormuz. Prime Minister Carney emphasized Canada's supports for efforts to safeguard international shipping and ensure freedom of navigation. The leaders condemned the indiscriminate attacks carried out by Hezbollah and reaffirmed their support for Lebanon and Lebanese sovereignty and territorial integrity. They agreed to remain close contact as the situation evolves. With regard to making more barrels of oil from the reserves available, the United States decided that they are going to do so too. And the number sounds impressive, but when somebody did the math and when they calculated it, considering the number of barrels per day that is used, it was basically about six to 7 days worth. So basically, the United States were giving themselves, that person decided to interpret that as the United States giving them about 6 to 7 days to find a way to declare victory. For that to have any significant impact. Which, of course, it won't, because having things come online is going to take a little longer than that. Getting back to the CTV article, Carney also spoke with Qatar's Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani on Monday, according to his office. Carney faced some heckles from the Conservative benches about being absent Monday. BC Conservative MP Frank Caputo at one point yelled, "Thanks for coming out." He's a bit of a dick, Frank Caputo, just saying. I've had one or two personal interactions with him, and not the nicest person. Ontario Liberal MP John Paul Danko returned the favor, telling Conservative leader Pierre PoiliOVER he should get his security clearance. Quote, "Your MAGA is showing," Danko later yelled to PoiliOVER as he and Carney sparred over the government's response to recent synagogue shootings in Canada. On Monday, several opposition MPs called out the Prime Minister for not showing up to debate on the Iran war that the government itself initiated, at the request of opposition parties, of course. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand and Defense Minister David McGuinty took part in Monday's debate in Carney's absence. Carney was not there because he was attending a community iftar, an event at sunset to break the daily fast during Ramadan, according to his Monday itinerary. Carney also did not attend question period on Monday. Parliamentary rules prevent MPs from making statements in the House about who is not there, but many pointed out during Monday's debate that Carney had yet to explain Canada's position on the war to them or to answer any of their questions. Quote, "In Quebec and across Canada, people are wondering where the Prime Minister is. Where is the Prime Minister in this debate? Where is the Prime Minister in this arena that we call the House of Commons?" said Quebec Conservative MP Gérard Deltel. PoiliOVER at one point tried to point out Carney's absence. He was cut off by the Speaker. because PoiliOVER always loves to obey the rules. Carney has been accused in recent days of inconsistency in his approach to the war. While he initially supported the airstrikes as a means of preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, again, media keeps on reporting this. It's not precisely what he said. He didn't precisely say he supports the airstrikes, but it's being reinterpreted that way. Carney said days later that support came with regret because the U.S. and Israel did not follow international law when they launched hostilities. Again, that is not my reading. My reading was he said it was with regret because the international system had failed to stop Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon and being an exporter of terrorism when it could have had the chance. Because the bodies, either because of vetoes or any of those types of things, were not able to get the job that they were originally designed to do done. And then he pointed out that U.S. and Israel did not follow international law when they launched hostilities. The regret was that the international rules-based system had not succeeded in achieving the goal of preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon, or to be on the path to it, or for it to be so conclusively obvious that they were not, that nobody would have to worry about it. That was the regret. A lot of interesting reframing going on here. He later came in for more criticism when he refused to rule out Canada participating in the war. Carney made that statement in response to a question and indicated it was a hypothetical situation. Bloc Québécois House Leader Christine Normandin said Carney's decision not to join the debate Monday follows a pattern her party has observed throughout his first year in office, a disinterest at best for parliamentary work and for answering questions and for accountability. NDP leader Don Davies said Carney's decision to skip the debate was unacceptable. Other people, however, are noticing that a lot of Carney's absences have to do with the fact that he is traveling around the world, working hard to get those deals because, again, there's limited time to make that pivot. And one of the reasons for which Carney and the Liberals are doing so well in public opinion polling at the moment is because people view him as being competent. If I'm going to use a hockey analogy, Carney seems to be working very hard in the corners to get the puck. And Canadians can appreciate someone who works very hard in the corners. And it seems that this is not going to stop for Carney, despite the criticism, because according to Judy Trin of CTV, Mark Carney, of course, as we know, Norway, to meet with Nordic leaders with aims to deepen defense cooperation in the Arctic while pitching investment in Canada North. Of course, there's going to be a NATO exercise that's going there that he's going to observe. Defense Minister David McKenty and Stephen Fura, Secretary of State for Defense Procurement, will join Carney on the trip to Northern Europe. The meeting will mark the first time a Canadian Prime Minister has conducted an official visit to Norway since 1980. Again, far too long. During a background briefing, senior government officials told reporters that Nordic leaders are interested in hearing more about Carney's ideas on how middle powers can work together to advance their interests following his speech last month in Davos, Switzerland. Quote, Canada's standing in the Nordic region has never been higher. The Nordic countries look at Canada as an important player economically, demographically, and as members of the G7, officials said. The visit also comes at a time when U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened sovereignty of both Canada and Greenland. On Tuesday, Trump referred there's a typo in the article. On Tuesday, Trump referred to Carney as the future governor in a social media post on Truth Social. Before heading overseas, the delegation will make a pit stop in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, to make an announcement related to major project development and defense. Once in Norway, Carney will participate in a trilateral meeting with Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz on Friday in Bardufoss. The two European countries are backing the TKMS submarine bid to build 12 vessels for Canada. In the briefing, a source said that submarines are not expected to be part of the official program as the bids are still being assessed. In Bardufoss, the three leaders will observe 25,000 NATO troops practice cold response drills, including a contingent of Canadian Special Operations Forces. Soldiers from 14 nations are conducting training exercises on land, sea, and air in the Arctic Circle. Then on Saturday in Oslo, Carney will meet with Scandinavian business executives, followed by Nordic Council Canada Summit, when Carney will sit down with the leaders of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Iceland. Seeking foreign direct investment into Canada and new sources of foreign capital is at the heart of every international engagement with both political and corporate leaders, said a senior government source. They noted that Norway has one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world and sophisticated and deep-pocketed investors. Carney's office said he will aim to position Canada as a premier destination for investment in defense, critical minerals, and artificial intelligence, particularly refining capacity when it comes to critical minerals. The Liberal government pledged to spend $81.8 billion on defense in budget 2025. Of that amount, $6.6 billion will be directed to the recently released Defense Industrial Strategy. Industry Minister Mélanie Joly said that Canada's new Arctic foreign policy is fundamentally about investing and creating jobs. You will see the Prime Minister in the coming days and months showing how much this is an important region for Canada and the world, Joly said on Wednesday as she walked into caucus. We're putting our money where our mouth is. Archer Wilczynski, who served as Canada's ambassador to Norway between 2014 and 2018, says this visit by Carney sends an important message. Quote, both Sweden and Finland have recently joined NATO. Denmark is also a long-standing partner. The fact that Carney is meeting all the Nordics while he's there shows that our countries can cooperate more on security and defense. Wilczynski, who's a senior fellow at the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Ottawa, says Canada can learn a lot about security from the Nordic nations that border Russia and their experience during the Cold War and the ongoing war in Ukraine. The former diplomat says that Canada should also take note of how Norway has invested in roads, schools, housing, and healthcare for the people of the North. He says there's a marked difference in the standard of living for people in the European Arctic compared to Canada's North. That, he says, is a greater risk to Canada's sovereignty than Russian, Chinese, or American military threats. Quote, I'm more concerned about our sovereignty being whittled away by neglect by the fact that people of the Arctic don't feel that the Canadian government and the people of Canada actually care about their well-being. Following his visit to Norway, the Prime Minister will stop over in the United Kingdom, where he will meet with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer at 10 Downing Street. The two leaders are expected to discuss the war in the Middle East. After his bilateral meeting with Starmer, Carney will not be returning home with the Canadian delegation. Instead, the Prime Minister's office says he will remain in Europe for personal commitments until March 22nd. During this period, the Prime Minister will remain in close coordination with his team and officials on several critical priorities, officials with the PMO wrote in response to a query from CTV News. While government officials and reporters return to Canada on the Airbus, a second plane will stay with Carney overseas. The federal government owns a fleet of Challenger jets that is used for transporting VIPs across Canada or on short international flights. As per longstanding government policy and for security reasons, the Prime Minister must travel on government aircraft, whether on official or personal business. Because Carney is traveling for personal reasons, the Prime Minister will reimburse travel costs equivalent to commercial airfares, as has been the case with past Canadian leaders. It seems that after all of this is over, he might be taking some personal vacation time. And from what I was able to see in other articles, that it would be, I believe, that he is going to Rome. If I'm not mistaken here. Another trip where hopefully there will be deals signed and things of the like. Of our European partners, there was also development yesterday in Europe. It would appear that Europe has decided as well that it wishes to get a little bit closer to Canada. According to news from the European Parliament, in a report adopted on Wednesday, ministers of European Parliament called for deeper EU-Canada cooperation to tackle security threats and boost trade amidst rising geopolitical tensions. Given the current turmoil in the international order, the EU must elevate its strategic partnerships with Canada to a new level, MEPs said, pointing to shared interests and values. To address security threats such as Russia's war against Ukraine, hybrid attacks, terrorism, foreign interference, and China's assertiveness and economic coercion, MEPs, those are ministers of or members of European Parliament, called for increased cooperation with Canada. They stressed the need to implement the Security and Defence Partnership in full, complementing NATO's efforts through initiatives such as the Security Action for Europe, that's the SAFE program, and the Rearm Europe Plan Defence Readiness 2030. The EU and Canada should step up their support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, notably through the G7 and the Coalition of the Willing, coordinate sanctions and diplomatic efforts to further isolate Russia, and jointly foster relations with the United States. The report also calls for closer coordination to address challenges posed by China, including the Western Balkans, stronger engagements in the Indo-Pacific, and joint efforts towards a just and lasting Middle peace in the Middle East. Lasting peace in the Middle East. Oh boy, I'm really having trouble today. MEPs highlight the importance of defending multilateralism and safeguarding key institutions such as the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, the World Trade Organization, NATO, and the G7 and G20 forums. They call for deeper cooperation in the Arctic, express concern over the region's militarization, and want joint efforts to safeguard Greenland's autonomy amid rising geopolitical interest. The text finally stresses the need to promote the benefits of CETA, that's the comprehensive trade agreement that we have with Europe, and strengthen energy cooperation. MEPs urged the 10 member states that have not yet ratified CETA to do so swiftly ahead of the 10-year anniversary in 2027 of its provisional application. The resolution was adopted by 482 votes in favor and 108 against, with 42 abstentions. The rapporteur, Tobias Kremer from Germany, said, quote, Canada is perhaps the most European country outside Europe, and today we can say it is more European than ever because of our shared strategic interests and the common challenges we face. In a world shaped by a war-addicted Russia, an assertive China, and an increasingly erratic American ally, Europeans and Canadians know, quote, we can only safeguard our interests and our security in the Arctic, in Ukraine, when it comes to climate change in Greenland, by standing together and deepening our cooperation. It is high time for this close strategic alignment to be translated into a deeper Euro-Canadian alliance. So, yeah, that happened. And it's interesting because Pierre, of course, has been promoting certain concepts like the New Zealand, Canada, New Zealand, UK, Australia sort of group, which would be in line for him because, well, you know, it's a very Anglo-Saxon, says the show host as he sips, well, I would say tea, but in this case, water. But the Prime Minister seems to be a little ahead of Pierre with that. And it's so cute to see Pierre talking about, you know, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, UK, as if it was his idea when it's an idea that's existed for quite a while. But the Prime Minister is already way ahead of him because he is looking at playing a key role at joining the CETA and CPTPP blocks. And conveniently, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK all happen to be members of the CPTPP. So if both blocks join to create, I think, a block of 1.5 billion people, you know, it may not have the elements of Canada and New Zealand, US, UK in terms that, you know, we would be able to freely work in each other's nations and all that type of stuff, which that's something we can still pursue. But the Prime Minister is working on a much bigger deal here, and the Europeans are actually expressing and voting on positively getting closer to us. Another thing in the readout with the G7 leaders was that statement about oil reserves. And it would seem yesterday that Pierre had some of his speeches before and while he was on his European tour, that Canada should have a strategic oil reserve and should have a strategic critical minerals reserve. The first one for the strategic oil reserve. We're going to have a clip on that because it was brought up in the House. But for the strategic critical minerals reserve, it's kind of hard to have a strategic critical minerals reserve if they're not being mined yet and you don't have the refining capacity. So a lot of these things that Pierre PoiliOVER keeps on mentioning about negotiating from a position of strength and acquiring leverage are things that the Prime Minister already is working on, and things that would take a long time to accomplish before we actually did have leverage. And the part that Pierre's policy tricks seem to be missing is that we're negotiating with the United States now. So it's like, wouldn't it be great if we had a critical minerals reserve and then we could hold that as leverage, telling the United States, well, hey, if you want access to our reserves, then you need to give us a tariff-free deal. Except, like I said, we're negotiating now, and by the time we would build those reserves, we can't get that leverage prior to going into the negotiating room. Our critical minerals reserves are the known deposits that we have in the ground that we're looking to find ways to exploit, and the contracts that we're signing for those, or will be signing for those. Pierre seems to not have a good sense of how time works. You can't, if Pierre wanted to build all the leverage that he claims that Canada needs so that we could be stronger at home and unbreakable abroad, Pierre would not be able to enter that negotiating room, assuming everything goes correctly, to negotiate that bitter tariff-free deal with the United States for another 5 to 10 years from now, which gives the United States plenty of time to do damage. Here's a first clip from House of Commons yesterday, where Pierre, I think, thought that he was being clever, and didn't really particularly work out for him, because let's put it this way. Pierre keeps repeatedly wanting to show that he is as competent, or even more competent, than the Prime Minister on certain things that are the Prime Minister's actual will, and it doesn't end up working out well for him. So here's one of these such moments that happened recently, or maybe even yesterday.
The Prime Minister said he wants to keep it in the ground, and yet today we had the hilarious spectacle of the Liberal Natural Resource Minister saying Canada will do what it can to help with its stockpiles for the current energy shortage. Our stockpiles are zero, Mr. Speaker. So will the Prime Minister flip-flop again, adopt my policy that we should have a strategic oil and mineral reserve so that we can supply the world in the future?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there's many policies of the member opposite I will not adopt. One of them is flip-flopping, jumping around, searching for ridings every election. The second thing I will not adopt is the importance of having the most competitive oil and gas in the world. Our oil exports have never been higher under this government, over 5 million barrels per day, and they will increase because they will be low carbon, low cost, low risk. Here, here, here.
So Pierre walking a little bit into that one. Question period was one of the things that he was relatively good at when it was his purposes, and there are frequently more moments of the Prime Minister seeming to own Pierre PoiliOVER in this manner, which is kind of as well in question yesterday, during which the Prime minister seemingly had to explain to Pierre PoiliOVER the difference between being a key importer and a key exporter of oil when it comes to the oil reserves that Pierre wants to speak or wants us to have. Now, it is true that Canada doesn't have an oil reserve of its own, but there is that G7 oil reserve that's there. And, well, I wonder who contributes to that. Perhaps that might be us. So, here, Kits and Cubs, is another moment of Pierre PoiliOVER thinking he was being clever. And then we have a moment of someone who's smart, because a clever only gets you so far, responding.
Mr. Speaker, sometimes he makes it too easy. Today we have 0 oil stockpile. We have a strategic maple syrup stockpile, Mr. Speaker, which the Prime Minister could use to put maple syrup on the pancakes that he flip-flops on. But, Mr. Speaker, we don't have any oil to supply to the world.
Okay, pancakes that he flip-flops on? I mean, that doesn't even make sense. Anyway.
World in the time of this crisis. Will he reverse the anti-development policies that he has supported that has come from the previous Liberal government in order to unlock our production, power the world, and the paychecks here at home?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is the way the G7 oil reserve works. If you're an importer, you have to have an oil reserve. If you're an exporter, which Canada is under this government, if you have record exports, which Canada is under this government, that is how you supply the world. I salute the work of the Minister of Natural Resource and the Minister of Finance, working with G7 counterparts, confirmed with my G7 leader counterparts today to release 400 million barrels from that strategic reserve.
So there you go. Pierre PoiliOVER, once again, wanting to lead and represent a country that he just does not know how it works, doesn't care how it works, and is too lazy to do the work of figuring it out how it works. Then stands in the House of Commons, fancies himself clever, says a couple of things that make no sense in the process of fancying himself clever, gets his clip, for which the answer from the Prime Minister will be cut so that he can market to his own base. Oh my God, I can't believe we have a maple syrup strategic reserve and we don't even have a strategic oil reserve. Aren't we a shithole or broken or whatever country? And then the Prime Minister standing up and reminding him that the entire reason that there's a G7 reserve is because Canada contributes to it. Our reserves are shared. We are already set up to be able to help some of our partners. The thing Pierre claims to want already exists, just not in the form that Pierre would like, for it to be here at home and just us, so that we can dole it out, Trump style. Well, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to give you some of our strategic oil reserves, but first you got to do us a favor, though. I mean, this guy's exhausting. Exhausting. So yes, Pierre apparently needed to be schooled a little bit yesterday on how things actually work. So Prime Minister has been clear that we will not be participating in the Israeli-U.S. part. Said it in no uncertain terms now. It was very clear, at least to us. That's what the Prime Minister had said days ago. But he didn't say the words, "we will never participate," so I guess that's enough. So now he has. Right? If we do get dragged in to what's going on there, it's going to be because of the consequences of Israeli and U.S. action, because we will either need to defend a NATO ally or Canadian interests somewhere, or protect actual Canadians who may find themselves there. But we will not be participating in Operation Epic Fury. Sorry. Pierre wants us to do the Can, New Zealand, UK, Australia thing. We're thinking bigger. European CPP together, with Europeans expressing a desire, voting on it even, to get closer to us. Pierre PoiliOVER wants a strategic critical minerals reserve when we're not extracting and processing enough of them for it to actually matter at the moment. But that is the plan. That's why we have those special projects. Pierre PoiliOVER complaining in the House of Commons that under C5 itself, that legislation has not been used to bring any major project forward. Okay, well, that doesn't mean major projects are going forward despite C5. And if C5 is necessary, it will be there. If we're able to do these things without having to use C5, it would be very much better, because we wouldn't have to override any rules or whatnot. But we have the power to do that should it be needed. Pierre's looking at the fact that it has not been needed yet as a failure, but not counting the projects that have been approved. The rest of us count the projects that have been approved, whether it needs C5 or not. He complained that the Defense Investment Agency would just be yet another bureaucracy, but as we read on the show, the submarine bid is proceeding at speeds that nobody bidding on this has ever seen before coming from Canada. Pierre PoiliOVER wants us to have a strategic oil reserve at home when we already have one that we share with the G7, to which we contribute. Pierre PoiliOVER claims to be traveling after complaining that Mark Carney wastes carbon on jets. And why can't he fly commercial when we all know why it is he can't fly commercial? To go to all these events, to get photo ops and not get much done. Had his European tour where he didn't, where he got a lot of photo ops, if you look at his Twitter feed, and didn't get much done because I don't think he spoke to anyone that was actually in government at the time who could be more helpful. And now Pierre has announced that he is now taking a trip to the United States, which everybody was wondering why it is he didn't go to the United States first. And, I'm not sure how useful that trip is going to be, because according to the Canadian press, Conservative leader Pierre PoiliOVER is heading to the States for several days of meetings to meet with auto leaders, advocate for Canadian energy, and fight for a tariff-free deal. Okay, I'm not sure on whose authority he's going to fight for a tariff-free deal on free on trade. Let me try that again. Fight for tariff-free trade. But I don't know who he's going to do that with, because the article then goes on to say PoiliOVER is set to hit the road later this week, and his itinerary does not include a stop in Washington, D.C. Jamil Javani got to go to Washington, D.C. Jamil Javani got to meet with JD. Jamil Javani even got like 2 or 3 minutes, I think, with President Trump while he was in another meeting, it would seem. But Pierre is not even going to Washington, D.C. So how is he going to fight for tariff-free trade if he doesn't go to Washington, D.C., even if he had the authority to do so. PoiliOVER's office said he's spending Friday and Saturday in Windsor, Ontario and Detroit. He is set to travel to Houston and Austin in Texas early next week to meet with people in the energy industry. He will wrap the trip with a stop in New York, where he's scheduled to speak about his vision for Canada-US relations at an event hosted by the Foreign Policy Association. PoiliOVER said in a video posted to social media Wednesday that he plans to defend an integrated North American auto industry and fight for tariff-free trade during the first leg of his trip, two things that the American administration has specifically said it does not want. While in Texas, he said he will advocate for Canadian energy. Quote, because, and this is the guy who just campaigned in the election of us being way too dependent on the United States for our energy. Advocating for us to send more of it south, where we don't get the best price for it. Quote, as I said in a recent speech, we need to leverage the relationship we have with the American people, PoiliOVER said in the video. Canada cannot control every decision made in Washington, and I'll leave the negotiating up to our government, but we can leverage the goodwill and shared interests with the American people. Again, I will note that it was in January of last year that then Prime Minister Trudeau had an extraordinary meeting where he invited all the leaders of the opposition parties in and asked him to do just that. Pierre's getting around to that 1 year and 3 months later, using his personal contacts, whatever ones he may have, to try and help. And it doesn't seem that he is actually going to try and help. I think he's just trying to shore up his own image here. This is PoiliOVER's second international trip as opposition leader after he traveled to the UK and Germany last week. Pierre's essential point here about his vision for Canada-US relations is that we've always had great relationships with the United States until maybe recently, and we should not treat this speed bump as being some type of permanent rupture, as the Prime Minister seems to be indicating that it is. When Pierre speaks of the Prime Minister classifying this as a permanent rupture, Pierre's vision in his head appears to be that we should move completely away from the United States and have no relationships in dealing with it anymore, which of course, is not the case. Right? Nobody said that. That would be pretty difficult to do, and even if though some of us would really like it, if that was the case, that we could just say, United States, we wash our hands with you. We're not going to do any business with you whatsoever anymore. Screw yourselves. That's probably not going to happen, and certainly not, even if that was the goal, it certainly isn't going to happen in 10 years, right? We are so linked. But claiming that you are going to the United States to fight for tariff-free trade when you're going to speak to absolutely nobody that has a hand or a say in the decision as to whether or not we're going to get that, and going in after Jamil has already gone before you and not even meeting with as high-level people as Jamil got to meet with, doesn't set the stage for you having a great trip. Or at least not a trip that's going to have you have a lot to write home about. It looks like another trip to burn some carbon, get a few photo ops, and come back with no results. It would seem that Pierre PoiliOVER is so desperate to be Mark Carney, so desperate to have a, hey, look at me, I can Carney too moment, that he is willing to become the version of Mark Carney that he describes Mark Carney as being, with disdain. I always found that really interesting about the Conservatives. A similar thing is going on in Alberta with all the years that they spent punching down and mocking Quebec. Now Alberta, at least the separatists, want to be Quebec. It's boy. But yeah. Now, had Pierre PoiliOVER made this trip before Jamil Javani did, maybe things would have worked out a little better for him on how this would appear. But that's not the case. So yeah, and going to the United States, but not going to Washington, D.C., and seemingly not going to be talking to elected officials of any note. Once again, probably like the European trip, something that is organized quickly and at the last minute in order to try to get him into the headlines. But unfortunately, not enough time behind it to plan it well, to organize it well, to ensure that the people he's going to meet with are going to be people of substance. You can only go so far when you don't do the work. The preparatory work, the very vital preparatory work that is needed for a trip like this to yield you the headlines that you want. It really looks, there's a great editorial cartoon I saw the other day when it comes to this. And it really does make me think this. Remember those Bugs Bunny Looney Tune cartoons with that big bulldog and the little, I think it was a terrier. The big dog was like named Spike, and the dog was like, "Hey Spike, hey Spike, hey Spike, what are we gonna do today? We're gonna go get some cats." And then Spike would go, "Yeah, shut up," and smack him, and the little dog would go flying, and then the dog would come back and be like jumping all around him and happy, 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 right? Spike is my friend because he's so big and strong. Somebody did an editorial cartoon that kind of reminded me of that moment, even with the reference to Spike here. For some reason, there we go. Hey, Spike. I mean, Mark, look, I'm international too. I went to London. Did you see? Did you see? Yeah. That's pretty much it. Oh, boy. Poor Pierre. Poor Pierre. I almost feel sorry for him. I don't. Because, I mean, he brought this upon himself. But maybe if he had been much less of a dick on the way up, I might feel a little bit of pity for him on the way down. But I don't. Then again, I'm petty. Chester and Spike, yes. Thank you, Kid Playing with 3D. Indeed. Chester and Spike. Oh my God. Okay. So yeah. Pierre will do what Pierre does, I guess. And we'll see how it works out for him. But that's not, again, that he is not going to DC kind of sets the table for his trip to be mocked a little bit. Oh well, c'est la vie. The other thing I wanted to mention is, according to our friends, I think at the Breakdown, Alberta, Indigenous Chiefs are, how would you put it? Indigenous Chiefs are not too happy with what Danielle is doing on separation, of course, and accommodating them. And they have been taking some steps in order to mount their displeasure. And one of the things that they have been doing, or that they have done, is they recently met with King Charles to discuss the issue. As you know, or as you might know, constitutionally, Indigenous people, their relationship is with the Crown specifically. And therefore, given that special relationship, when provinces claim that they can do whatever they want with Indigenous people, that's not exactly true, particularly their land. According to Jack Farrell and Lisa Johnson of the Canadian Press, the Grand Chief of the Confederacy of Treaty 6 First Nations says King Charles, quote, expressed his concern on Wednesday after hearing about a separatist push in Alberta during a face-to-face meeting with Indigenous leaders. Grand Chief Joey Pete, who was part of a delegation of Treaty 6 chiefs who went to Buckingham Palace, said in a news release that the king was, quote, very interested in what the Indigenous leaders had to say. Quote, we made him aware of the separatism issue in Alberta and the threat to treaty it represents, the chief said. He expressed his concern and committed to learning more. The meeting took place in response to invitations Indigenous leaders had sent to the king to attend an event this summer marking the 150th anniversary of Treaty 6 being signed. Pete also said he asked the king to issue a royal proclamation to affirm the sacredness of the treaty and the rights it affords. Quote, it was a significant meeting as treaty partners and equals. Pete is also the chief of the Sunchild First Nation southwest of Edmonton. Lewis Bold Tribe Chief Desmond Bull, who was also part of the delegation, said another topic of conversation was Canada's, quote, ongoing failure to meet treaty obligations. He took it all very seriously, Bull said. Pete was not available for an interview with the Canadian Press, but earlier Wednesday he told CTV News that the king is planning to meet with Prime Minister Mark Carney next week. Rajan Sani, Alberta's Indigenous Relations Minister, said Wednesday she was hoping to speak with Pete directly about the alleged treaty violations. Quote, I would like to know more about what he thinks those treaty violations are, and I think I'd have to speak to him to hear from him directly to understand his perspective, Sani told reporters at the provincial legislature in Edmonton. And here, there's this great image that I want to show you, kids and cubs, taken from the meeting with the king here. So let's put it up on screen, and hopefully it is showing to you. No, not yet. I do not like this new system at all. There you go. Let's see if we can make that a little larger. There we go. And it says here, from left to right, Pete, of course, Beardies and Okemasis Cree Nation Chief Edwin Ananas, Mistawasis Nehiyawak Chief Daryl Watson, King Charles, Atathkakup Cree Nation Chief Larry Ahenku, Stony Knoll First Nation Councillor Gary Laplante, Sturgeon Lake First Nation Chief Christine Longjohn, and Lewis Bull Tribe Chief Desmond Bull. Now, that's a picture I like to see. Right there. So yeah, they had a meeting with King. And of course, Sani told reporters, finished the statement stating that she would like to know more about what he thinks those treaty violations are, saying, at this point, I don't agree with those allegations. Gee, of course. What prize? Sani said she thought it was an opportunity for the Treaty 6 delegation to meet with the king and for the king to meet with Carney. Quote, dialogue is important at every level about a number of different issues. Everybody has their perspective. I'd be interested in learning more about what comes out of those meetings. Buckingham Palace did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Indigenous leaders have been vocally opposed to the separatist movement in Alberta for months. In fact, recently, First Nations chief unanimously passed a non-confidence vote in the Alberta government. And of course, the First Nation some First Nations, or at least one of them, is suing Alberta over changes enabling a separation petition. That's the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, because they say that it would violate treaty rights. The Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation said that it plans to ask, at least when the article came out, which this was in January, plans to ask the Court of King's Bench of Alberta to issue an urgent interim injunction against the petition itself. And stating that Alberta has treated the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation as though they are chattel on the land, merely an afterthought in forced negotiations, not the first step in any political secession. This is contrary to law. Alberta secession cannot happen without First Nation consent to change a party to Treaty Number 8 consent. Not consultation is required before the question of secession is delegated from a party to the treaty to the individuals who have come to inhabit Alberta. Chief Sheldon Sunshine said the provincial government's push to pass Bill 14 in the final days of the legislature's fall sitting prompted the First Nation to take action. The bill removed the requirement for a referendum question to align with the Constitution. And then Danielle Smith has been having some rhetorical gymnastics on about whether or not the thing is constitutional or could be made constitutional. On February 28th, First Nations chiefs across Alberta unanimously passed a vote of non-confidence in the Alberta government, citing concerns around the separatist movement and a failure to meet their treaty responsibilities. In a news release, the Assembly of Treaty Chiefs of Treaty Number 6, Number 7, and Number 8 said the provincial government governed by the UCP has repeatedly shown a lack of understanding and respect for its treaty responsibilities, demonstrating its, quote, inability to responsibly and respectfully govern the province of Alberta. Quote, we have to put the government on notice that this is completely unacceptable, Trevor McCready, Grand Chief of Treaty 8 First Nations of Alberta, told CBC News. The Assembly, which convened Thursday in Enoch Creation, just west of Edmonton, called on party-aligned and independent MLAs alike to also declare non-confidence vote in the government. In a statement to CBC News through her press secretary, Indigenous Relations Minister Rajan Sani said the government prioritizes building and maintaining relationship with First Nations. That's bull. Quote, we value these relationships and remain committed to transparency, collaboration, mutual respect, and supporting reconciliation. They don't even commit to transparency, collaboration, and mutual respect in how their daily governance. They're certainly not going to do it to reconciliation. Quote, Alberta's position has been clear and consistent. The Constitution is the highest law of the land, and Section 38 recognizes and affirms existing Aboriginal treaty rights and provides constitutional protection for these rights. This has not changed. Yes, that you are able to read the Constitution, reiterate what it says, does not mean that your position is to actually respect it, however, Minister Sani. In a joint statement, NDP leader Naheed Nenshi and other opposition members said they categorically denounced separatism, promising to stand with First Nations and uphold the treaty relationship. The non-confidence vote comes roughly 2 months after a controversial citizen-initiated petition about separation was approved. The organization needs to gather 177,732 signatures by May 2nd before it can be put to a referendum. The petition brought forward by the Alberta Prosperity Project poses, quote, do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be part of Canada to become an independent state? Yeah, not sure. To become a state, yes. Independent? Not sure. Multiple First Nations criticized the proposal, including Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, which is suing the provincial government for legislative changes that enabled the separation petition. In December, a Court of King's Bench judge deemed a similar independence question would be unconstitutional, citing charter and treaty rights. In her statement, Sani said amendments to the Provincial Referendum Act reaffirm that a result of a referendum cannot be implemented if they contravene sections 1 to 35 of Canada's Constitution, which includes Indigenous treaty rights. So here's this thing. If that is the case, then what is Danielle Smith doing to the people who support that project? Just giving them a make work thing for them to occupy their time? Because if the question is unconstitutional, and a judge has already said it is, but, well, they removed the requirement for the question to be constitutional, but the results of the referendum still have to be in line with the Constitution, and the Constitution is very, very clear that this type of separation cannot be done. Then why are they humoring that side by changing the rules and making it easier for them to get their petition over the finish line? If the results of a referendum, should it pass, would be unconstitutional and could not be implemented. Again, Mr. Don Davies, if you want to talk about a position that is all over the place, incoherent and inconsistent, this is what it looks like. Grand Chief McCready said the potential referendum did not solely spark the non-confidence vote, but it was the final straw for First Nations chiefs in the province. The vote, he said, culminated from the government's failure to build relationships with Indigenous groups, specifically when it comes to legislation, for at least a year. McCready pointed to several recent pieces of proposed legislation that could negatively affect the health and safety of Indigenous communities, including Bill 7, which would change interbasin water transfers, Bill 11, which would allow doctors to work in public and private healthcare alike, and Bill 13, which would limit investigations into Alberta workers and regulated professions for what they say outside of work. To him, those bills lacked Indigenous consultation. The hope would be that the government can work with the First Nations, but we just don't see it because we've been trying, he said. It's really concerning because it's hard to have a seat at the same table with somebody when you don't trust them, when you have no confidence that they're going to take your issues seriously, and when they routinely show explicit disdain for your existence. Kahiwan Cree Nation Okinawa Chief Vernon Watchmaker said the government has failed to uphold treaty promises, which has led to underfunded health, housing, and social programs, but its response towards the potential separation referendum in particular is also discouraging. Quote, we're seeing a higher level of racism that we haven't seen in a long time, and to bring this type of energy and bringing it onto the mainstream again is something that's very concerning, Watchmaker said. He hopes the non-confidence vote will encourage the Alberta government to address First Nations concerns and work towards a mutually beneficial coexistence framework. McCready said he hesitates to believe that the provincial government will respond to the asks that come with the non-confidence vote. He also wants the government to denounce rising separatist rhetoric, he added. So yeah, the Chiefs are getting busy here. And of course, when it comes to all of this, NDP leader Naheed Nenshi, who's accused Smith of pandering to both sides of the debate and triggering economic uncertainty in the process, continued the criticism Wednesday by saying he thought the government was more concerned about its political fortunes than recognizing and acting on the concerns that the separation movement has created. Quote, Minister Sani has a lot of explaining to do in terms of how she let this go this far, he said. We have a government that never thinks about the implications of what it's doing. So on that, our friends at The Breakdown brought us something really interesting here. It's a press release that came out from certain nations, the Tla'amin Nation, the Clahus First Nation, and the Comox First Nation. And The Breakdown said, not Alberta politics, but too good to not share. And it says here, MP crashes out over harmless land acknowledgement. So this is in the same theme because there's stuff going on in British Columbia here. Local chiefs reassure Aaron Gunn, chillax, bud. Now, probably might be a good idea to bring you a little information on what Mr. Aaron Gunn, noted anti-Indigenous politician and advocate, had to say. Aaron Gunn, who was considering running for the leadership of the BC Conservative Party at one point, and decided against it because he felt that there was no way he could win, or because one BC party was already doing the job better than he thought he would be able. But yes, I'm just trying to see here if I can find it here. He might have taken it off his feed here because there's to be no reference to it anymore. That's very interesting. But the press release goes on to say, it's titled, MP crashes out over harmless land acknowledgements. Marginal chiefs from 4 First Nations communities are urging the public to please approach Aaron Gunn with no caution whatsoever. He is completely harmless, though momentarily unsettled by the alarming possibility that someone might acknowledge the land before a meeting. Yesterday, on social media, the MP appeared to crash out and demand to speak to the manager of land acknowledgements, a position that observers confirm does not exist. Chiefs' territories make up the riding had 2 words for the MP. Chillax, bud. Land acknowledgements have never seized private property, cancelled a mortgage, repossessed a pickup truck, or altered a single title deed anywhere in Canada. They are simply people recognizing the history of the place where they are standing. No one is going anywhere. Canada will serve the brief moment of honesty. Until then, chiefs across the nation continue to reassure the public that land acknowledgements have not to date resulted in any land back. Signed, Haggis Hackett of the Tiamin Nation, Chief Darren Blaney, the Homalco Nation, Chief Nicole Rempel of the Comox Nation, and Chief Kevin Pesey of the Bahus Nation. I love Indigenous humor. Chillax, bud. My word. Finally, kits and cubs, on the list of sort of news that I had for you, is the fact that we finally have a new Parliamentary Budget Officer as well. You might have heard the Conservatives complaining a lot. Again, disingenuous framing that the Prime Minister had fired the previous PBO and was firing the interim one. It's not firing the first ones. Either the turnover decided that he was stepping down. There was an interim one, and as the words say, the title, interim, is there because it's not permanent. And his term was over. He, of course, wanted the main job, but while he was interim, made a couple of mistakes, statements that he acknowledged himself maybe went too far, and made it such that he basically took himself out of the running for the new job, or for the job, the permanent job. And then there was a couple of days during which his term ended and the new Parliamentary Budget Officer had been named. And, well, Conservatives seem to have minds a little bit about it. This is a Conservative MP, Sandra Kobina, and I would have to look where it is that she represents here. Member of Parliament for Newmarket, Aurora. And this here is them losing their minds because for a few days there was no Parliamentary Budget Officer, either interim or permanent. So let's see how the Conservatives were trying to frame this.
Canada no longer has a Parliamentary Budget Officer, and this is at the very moment that this Liberal government is running a $78 billion deficit. And this is the largest one outside of COVID. And at the very moment that they have reclassified $94 billion from operating expenses to investments. And conveniently, right after the PBO and international organizations have called for independent verification. Yet Canada's independent fiscal watchdog is gone, and the Liberals have not appointed a replacement. This negligence has not gone by unnoticed. The former PBO warned that the federal government is silencing an agent of Parliament. The OECD has described Canada's PBO as best in class, a model for other democracies around the world. And ironically, just last week, the OECD warned that the lack of permanent appointments is a threat to stability. And the PBO is the independent person who tells Canadians what's really happening with their money. And this is what concerns me the most. The Liberals have known for 7 years that this term was ending. 7 years plus a 6-month extension, and still no permanent appointment. So Canadians should be asking a question. Why and what are they trying to hide when deficits are rising, when fiscal definitions are being stretched for what appears to be political convenience, when trust in our public finances matters most? That is exactly when you strengthen oversight, not leave the position vacant. And Mark Carney himself appointed this parliamentary budget officer last fall. He did his job, he spoke truth to power, and that is why Conservatives have written to the Prime Minister requesting for the interim PBO to be appointed permanently. If this government truly believes in transparency, appoint the person you trusted with the job. Canada deserves independent oversight, and especially when this government is running historic deficits.
All right. So you can obviously hear how disingenuous a lot of that is. Of course, when she's saying appoint the person you trusted with the job, he was trusted with the job of being the interim Parliamentary Budget Officer, not the Parliamentary Budget Officer. Now, this was put out 5 days ago. 3 days ago, the PBO was named. There was a gap of 2 days. We are destroying our international reputation. What is it that they are trying to hide? We deserve this oversight. Not having the oversight for 2 days is, oh my God, such a terrible thing. It's a disaster. Fear, fear, fear. Outrage, outrage, outrage. Fear, fear, fear. Outrage, outrage, outrage. According to Policy Magazine, and this is written by Kevin Page himself, the first PBO. On March 9th, the Honorable Wayne Long, Secretary of State for Financial Institutions, tabled the certificate of nomination in the House of Commons to ask members of Parliament to approve Annette Ryan as the next Parliamentary Budget Officer of Canada. Ms. Ryan, who currently serves as a Deputy Director at the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre, or FinTrack, is an excellent choice. As a former Parliamentary Budget Officer, the first one, I am grateful that a well-qualified and known public servant has stepped forward to take on the role of Legislative Budget Officer at this critical moment in Canada's history. On January 20th, 2026, Prime Minister Carney delivered an important speech in Davos. He talked about the rupture in the world order and the need for a fundamental shift in our strategic posture. Budget 2025 set out a new fiscal policy approach that focused on economic growth through capital investment, trade diversification, and a significant boosting of our national defense capability. There's a reason why the late UK Prime Minister Harold Macmillan's description as to what can throw a government off course, quote, events, dear boy, events, has made such a comeback lately. Like it or not, itself in the middle of the parliamentary debate over how to best respond to the rupture in the global order and a series of, quote, a series of known and unknown events that will threaten to undermine the government's fiscal trajectory to an operating balanced budget. Think 2008 financial crisis, 2020 pandemic, and 2026 war in the Middle East. Parliament and Canadians need a parliamentary budget officer who can navigate these uncertain times with timely, independent, and authoritative analysis that will elevate transparency, debate, and accountability. This is not a business as usual. I'm going to guess, situation here. And therefore, a business cycle stabilization policy is not what's going to be needed. Annette Ryan has the smarts, Rhodes Scholar, degrees in mathematics and economics. Annette Ryan has the experience. She has worked in all three central agencies with responsibilities for budgeting, finance, treasury, and privy council. She led an analytical team at Industry Canada. Understanding the connection between the public and private sectors at the historical juncture is critical for Canada's efforts to boost capital investments and productivity. Annette Ryan has the character to lead in difficult times. I worked with Annette at PCO, that's the Privy Council Office, in 2005 and 2006. We provided economic and fiscal analysis to the Prime Minister, Cabinet, and the Clerk of the Privy Council. I saw firsthand her analytic and strategic thinking skills and her respect for public service values, including independent advice and loyal implementation. I saw an affable charm and grace that flows naturally from her family roots in Newfoundland and PEI. I saw the maturity of a good person and loving mom. The OECD recently gave Canada's PBO a good report card. Annette Ryan will get the keys to as a good domestic and international reputation and working relationships with parliamentarians and Canada's media. The challenges ahead are difficult. Institutional strength and trust will be tested. PBO will be pushed and pulled in different ways. On the fiscal stance of the government in an uncertain economic outlook, on prospects for hitting fiscal targets in a period of unprecedented increases in defense spending, on due diligence for major capital projects, on promoting fiscal transparency on complex public-private projects. I know that Annette Ryan will rise to these and other challenges. So Kevin Page. president of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy at the University of Ottawa, of course, former Parliamentary Budget Officer. So he gives her a good reputation, a good recommendation. And according to CBC here, the Liberal government has named senior public servant Annette Ryan to serve as the new Parliamentary Budget Officer. This is according to Peter Zimonjic. Ryan currently serves as deputy at FinTrack, Canada's financial intelligence unit and anti-money laundering agency, where she has worked since late 2019. Wayne Long, the Secretary of State for Financial Institutions, told the House of Commons on Monday that the government was nominating Ryan for a term of 7 years. Ryan has held a number of senior positions across the government, including as Associate Assistant Deputy Minister for Finance Canada and Chief Economist and Director General of the Economic Research and Policy Analysis for Industry Canada. She earned a Bachelor of Arts from Acadia University in Mathematics and a Master in Economics from the University of University of Oxford, according to her LinkedIn profile. And this, according to the Conservatives, makes the appointment awkward because, well, she and Carney were at Oxford at the same time. So, this must be a terrible appointment. He's nominating one of his friends because, yes, heaven forbid that Canada in key positions should have people in them who are accomplished enough and smart enough to be Rhodes Scholars and admitted to Oxford University. And she was there at the same time as Chrystia Freeland. Yeah, except that Chrystia Freeland was studying Slavonic studies and not in the economics department. But I'm sure Oxford University is just this tiny, tiny little place where almost nobody goes. And therefore, they must have developed a close relationship during that time, being in two completely separate departments. Potentially in different years that may have overlapped by a little bit. Before Ryan can take up the new post, she must first be confirmed by a vote in both the House of Commons and the Senate. PBOs can serve a maximum of 2 7-year terms in the role, but previous people who have held the position did not serve more than 1 term. The last permanent budget officer, Yves Giroux, ended his term in September of last year. On his day in office, the Carney government announced PBO official Jason Jakes would serve as the interim PBO for 6 months. While a permanent PBO must be approved by Parliament, an interim PBO can be installed directly by Cabinet through a Governor and Council appointment for an unlimited number of 6-month terms. Jakes, who has worked in the office since the first PBO was appointed in 2008, returned to his role as the institution's Director of General Economic Analysis on March 2nd. His tenure got off to a bumpy start when he was criticized for a controversial appearance before a parliamentary committee in September, wherein he described the health of Canada's federal finances as, quote, stupefying, shocking, and unsustainable. Kevin Page, Canada's first PBO and the president of the Institute for Fiscal Studies and Democracy at the University of Ottawa, reacted passionately to Jacques' language, telling CBC Power and Politics a few days later that Jacques was, quote, just wrong, and his musings were, quote, not consistent with the numbers. When the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development issued its report on PBO last month, it pointed to that performance as evidence that the PBO needs to improve how it communicates its findings going forward. This is the guy that the Conservatives wanted to remain in the position, judged by that video by Sandra Corbino. A person that was publicly chastised by the first ever PBO, that had to eat his words, and that had the OECD issue a report on the PBO last month pointing to that specific performance as evidence that the PBO needs to improve how it communicates its findings going forward. That's the person that the Conservatives thought deserved to remain in that position. Jakes told CBC News that his language in that hearing distracted parliamentarians from the message he was trying to convey. He later softened his language in his analysis of November's federal budget. The OECD also cited an error in 2024 under Giroux when a PBO report erroneously included the industrial carbon price in calculations for the consumer price as a second example of a communications issue. While the error was eventually corrected, the OECD report said the manner in which it was done demonstrated a lack of transparency. It also gave Conservatives tons of fuel to run on, which led to the decimation of consumer carbon pricing in Canada. Jakes began to tackle that problem earlier this year when he implemented the PBO's first communications and corrections policies. While the OECD criticized the PBO's communications, it still ranked the office as best among the 35 countries it examined. Conservative leader Pierre PoiliOVER, who had been made aware of Ryan's nomination last week, said Monday that Jakes should have been made permanent instead of being fired for telling the truth. Quote, Quote, Mark Carney is trying to muzzle the Parliamentary Budget Officer. No, his interim term just ended. That's all. We have a highly qualified Parliamentary Budget Officer who's calling out Mr. Carney, Poilievre said Monday. And then all of a sudden, only after months in the job, Carney is throwing him out. No, it was an interim position and the 6 months came to an end. Literally. That's what happened. He went back to his regular duties on the 2nd, and on March 9th, the new one, 1 week later, the new one was named. The Conservatives wanted Jakes in the job because he said something that he shouldn't have said, or at least in a way that he shouldn't have said it, that was embarrassing to the government, and that the Conservatives were able to use to pile on. No wonder they wanted it to stay. They didn't want that to stay for fiscal probity or for being particularly good at his job. They wanted him to stay because he was willing to go out over his skis and say things that probably should not be said, that were embarrassing to a political opponent. Because Conservatives really care about good governance and institution building. Sorry, couldn't maintain that straight face. Page, who worked with Ryan at the Privy Council office, disagreed with that assessment, telling CBC News that Ryan is an excellent choice, calling Ryan, quote, a well-known and highly regarded public servant. Page said she is an independent thinker with a backbone to support the values and analysis of the office. So there we go. Another little note for you, since I happen to have it open. According to Olivia Stefanovic, Ottawa has also committed an extra $1.55 billion to Jordan's Principle, since we were talking about the Chiefs and talking about good services. The federal government is pledging $1.55 billion in funding to ensure First Nations children have equal access to public services for the next year. Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Goldmasty made the announcement at a news conference in the House of Commons Thursday afternoon. In a statement prior to the news conference, she said the commitment will reduce uncertainty for First Nations after concerns were raised about the long-term funding of the legal initiative. Jordan's Principle must work for those who depend on it, Goldmasty said. We will continue working with First Nations leadership and families to ensure Jordan's Principle remains predictable, practical, and grounded in fairness and respect. Jordan's Principle is named after Jordan River Anderson, a boy from the Norway House Cree Nation in Manitoba. He died in 2005 at the age of 5 in the midst of a 2-year battle between Manitoba and Ottawa over who would pay for home care costs associated with this complex genetic disorder. In 2007, the House of Commons unanimously passed a motion to adopt a child-first perspective named after Anderson to ensure that First Nations children get necessary service without delays caused by jurisdiction disputes between the governments. In other words, make sure that the kid gets the service and you guys can squabble about who pays later. Jordan's Principle allows family limit requests for medical, mental health, educational, and physiotherapy needs. While it provides life-saving support, it's struggling to keep up with the surge in demand and pay service providers on time. Indigenous Services Canada, which runs the initiative, reported a backlog of 140,000 applications for Jordan's Principle in late 2024, with 25,000 labeled urgent. More than 10 million products, services, and supports were approved under Jordan's Principle between July 2016 and September 30th, 2025, the federal department said. The funding is meant to respond to that sustained demand over the past decade while work continues to reform Jordan's Principle with First Nations leaders and families. The new federal funding, which is set to last until 2027, comes as Goldmasty faces criticism for not repealing an operational bulletin released last year that limited the scope of services covered by Jordan's Principle. That bulletin bars approvals for home renovations, for example, if there's a lot of mold. I think we've talked about that previously on the show. Sporting events, international travel, non-medical supports, or school-related requests, unless they're required to ensure equality with kids who are not First Nations. Those changes have been criticized by First Nations leaders who say their communities are now unable to access educational mental health supports for kids who once qualified under Jordan's Principle. So there you go, kids and cubs. Just a little bit of extra news there. And, well, there you go. I think that's going to be enough for today, kids and cubs. So because I went for a whole lot more, actually, today I'm looking at the time than I thought I had material for. Well, that's not true, actually. I knew I had a lot of material. I just didn't really have a connecting theme to them because there was way too much material. Kids and Cubs, that's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show. We hope you love listening to us because we love making this for you. Remember, sharing is caring and word of mouth is priceless. So please tell your peeps and poops all about us, especially when you can share our content with a note from yourself explaining why it is it resonates with you or why it is people should read it, because that's advertising we just cannot buy, and you are influencers in your own circle. And we absolutely thank you for that. If you would like to help us in other ways, Kids and Cubs, you can go to our YouTube page, and if you are there already and haven't clicked subscribe, please do. This my God, this QR code, I'm having a lot of trouble today. This QR code will help bring you there, Kids and Cubs. And while you're there, please click on the like and share buttons as well. It helps us with the algorithm and helps people find us. And thank you very much for that. Other ways you can help us, Kids and Cubs, is by supporting our show financially, because we do incur some costs to bring it to you. And we are always very, very grateful for any financial support that we can get, especially now that we're fully independent. So thank you very much to all those who contribute to our show financially. It really does mean the world to us, and it does help us keep going. So if you can scan that QR code, it will bring you to our coffee page, and you can find that at ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, all in one word. And there you will find the Emergency Lodge's Emergency Hydration Fund, as we affectionately call it, where you contribute a few loonies or toonies to keep your favorite beaver nice and moist. Because a moist beaver is a happy beaver, and a properly moistened beaver is usually a beaver who doesn't trip over his tongue as much as he has today. So yeah, there you go, Kids and Cubs. And of course, we have one-time and monthly memberships there for you. Of course, when we donate through coffee, we get about 95 to 97% of your donation. We have our Super Chat memberships on YouTube, where we get about 70% of your donation. And if you're doing the Buy Canadian thing and you want us to receive 100% of your donation, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com is our email address. A direct bank transfer from Canadian bank to Canadian bank comes with 0 fees. You are buying Canadian. The US CE Tech Bros do not get a share of your money, and 100% of your donation comes to us. So it's win-win-win-win all the way. Everybody wins that way. So we thank you for your generous and sustained support. Without you, we would not be able to still be able to be broadcasting this. It's a labor of love, but it also comes with a cost. So we're happy that you are willing to share that with us, and which allows us to keep going. So we thank you very much for that. Kids and Cubs, because democracy is something that you do, of course, if you are an NDP member, you have until the 29th to vote. I'm not sure if your ballots have to be, I'm going to guess that your ballots have to be there in time to be counted on the 29th if you're mailing them in. So make sure that you mail them with enough time to get there. If you are going to the convention personally in Winnipeg, you will have a chance to vote there if you prefer. Of course, we have by-elections coming on April 13th, and I had this giggle to myself yesterday about the by-elections, because the best thing about Lori Idlout having moved at this particular time is that it completely blows up the Conservative and the Bloc strategy for the by-elections, because there's really no point anymore on campaigning on preventing a Liberal majority. And there really is no point in the Conservatives, if they were planning to do that, passing a few cards under the table to the Bloc to help them win in Terrebonne, because both of those strategies are now pretty much moot if University of Rosedale and Scarborough Southwest go the way that everybody expects them to go. And now that they've got Idlout, that brings them to 172. So the Conservatives at the last minute are trying to figure out what their new strategy will be. I'm guessing that they're going to fall back on their greatest hits. The Conservatives also recently made the announcement of their nominees for the by-elections. According to the Canadian press, Adrian, who ran for the Tories in last spring's election, will once again be on the ballot in Terrebonne, Quebec. That by-election was ordered after the Supreme Court annulled the Liberal single vote win over the Bloc Québécois. Don Hodgson will carry the banner in Toronto's University Rosedale. That was the seat left vacant by former cabinet minister Chrystia Freeland. And the Conservatives have not yet announced a candidate in the third by-election in Scarborough Southwest yet, the seat that was most recently held by Liberal Bill Blair. Of course, voting will be on April 13th. Advanced voting will be open from the 3rd to the 6th at polling stations, and you can vote anytime between now and the 7th at any Elections Canada office. And if you want a vote by mail ballot, you have to order it, I believe it is, before April 7th, so it has time to get to you and you have time to get it back so that it can be counted on time. There you go, kids and cubs. We also have the Alto Public Rail consultation. So altotrain.ca, I believe, is the website for that. If you want to have your views known, that is indeed the case. And of course, we have House of Commons Petition 7148 that will require all federal party leaders to obtain and maintain top security secret clearance to ensure they are fully informed of threats to Canada's national security and able to act decisively to protect Canadians and our democracy. And you can find that on our Commons website, 39,612 signatures to date, and I will include it as I always do in the chat so that you can find it there. There we go. And let's see, what else do we have? Oh yes, the Paralympics game, the stands, I should say, initiative, where you can make a donation of $250 to buy a virtual seat to the Paralympic Games and help increase the ability of Canadian Paralympians or para-athletes to participate in their sports and maybe elevate themselves to the Paralympic level. So far, kits and cubs, 11,414 Canadians have made a purchase, raising $285,360 to date. And we are definitely now past the halfway point on their campaign. Hopefully, the donations will keep coming in order to actually fill those stands over the next 3 days. We have the 12th, 13th, 14th, and the Paralympics coming to a close on the 15th. So if you are able to, please support this absolutely excellent cause. All right, kids and cubs, it could be a tough world out there, so please be kind to and gentle with yourself. And now on the count of 3, may I please have you say, Mr. Beaver, please cue the cock. On 1, 2, 3. Oh yes, I hear you loud and clear. And since you asked so nicely, here's a little cock-a-doodle-doo just for you. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community. And the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music. All right, kids and cubs. I'm just checking to see if I'm back yet. Yeah, there I am. I'm back. On a little note about some Canadians who make us proud. This is Team Canada's baseball team who are participating at the World Baseball Classic this year. And it would seem that for the first time in the event's history, Canada has made it out of the preliminary round. Had a victory against Cuba yesterday, 7-2, and that put them at the top of the standings. They were in Pool A, I believe it is. So they played against Puerto Rico, Cuba, Colombia, and Panama, got 3 wins and 1 loss, finished at the top. Their loss was to, surprisingly, Panama, who finished last. There you go. But along with Puerto Rico advance in Group B, Italy and the USA advance, Japan and South Korea advance in Group C, Dominican Republic and Venezuela advance out of Group D. So those are your top 8 teams that go into the playoffs. And Canada in their first round, great, drew the USA. That's not great because the United States finished second in their pool. Darn. Any other team, maybe, with perhaps the exception of Dominican Republic and Japan. But yes, it seems that Canada, for having done so well, and the United States having had a slight bobble, are going to face each other. That match is scheduled to take place tomorrow. If you're a baseball fan and you want to watch that, and also some props go to Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, twice Canadian Male Athlete of the Year, according to the I think it is the Canadian Press or the Toronto Star. Anyway, the year-end polling that takes place every year, and he just I think surpassed or matched Wilt, a record that was set by Wilt Chamberlain 2 days ago, according to the CBC here. Well, actually, the Associated Press, as it appears in the CBC, said that Oklahoma City's, that's the team he plays for, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, now has matched Chamberlain's NBA record of 126 consecutive regular season games of 20 or more points. The Hamilton native got there Monday night, scoring 35 points with a career-high 15 assists in the Thunder's 129-126 win over the Denver Nuggets. Quote, "It's crazy to think that where I was 10 years ago, I'd be here today," Gilgeous-Alexander said. It's the latest accolade on a long list for Gilgeous-Alexander, who was MVP, NBA Finals MVP, the league scoring champion, and led the Thunder to the league title last season. He's also generally considered as favorite in the MVP race this season. He says he doesn't try to fixate much on the scoring streak. Quote, "It's still a lot even to wrap my head around," Gilgeous-Alexander said. "To be honest with you, I try not even to think about it, especially during the season. So much is going on, so many things have to go right for you to get you ultimately want, and it gets 100% of my focus, especially basketball-wise." So there you go. And let's see. Yes, so everything's fine there. It says here that 126th and final game of Chamberlain's streak was January 19th, 1963 in St. Louis. He played all 48 minutes and finished with 35 points and 21 rebounds in a 116-114 loss against the Hawks. The teams played against the next night, and Chamberlain didn't stick around long. Referee Red Oates issued 2 technical fouls and tossed Chamberlain from the game after about 4 minutes, citing abusive language used by the superstar while he protested a foul call against teammate Rain Hightower. Chamberlain finished with 6 points. His scoring average dropped from 47 points per game to 46.2 in one evening. He also faced a mandatory ejection fine from the NBA. By league rule, it had to be at least $50 US. So perhaps in that sense, if Shea Gilgeous-Alexander doesn't get booted from the next match, then he probably will surpass Chamberlain's record. But there you go. Some Canadians who make us proud for you. All right. That's all for me today, kits and cubs. Amour et bisous. And I am off. See you tomorrow. Hopefully, I will be less frazzled and actually have a theme. Oh, and by the way, for those who are wondering, I didn't mention it. I keep on forgetting to mention it. But a couple of days ago, it's been 1 year since Mark Carney became Prime Minister of Canada. He's had a pretty good year, I would say. Let's hope it keeps going for all our sakes. All right, I'm off. Bye.